Chapter 1700. These were Shadowed Star's world principles, profound and unfathomable. Even Origin King Realm Masters could not touch them. Although Yang Kai had become a Star Master, he was still helpless against these world principles. He had tried to break through or disperse them, but had failed. Sighing, Yang Kai took back his divine sense and stopped trying. Although these world principles restricted a cultivator on Shadowed Star from breaking through to the Origin King Realm, they were not harmful to the cultivator, so there was no need to pay too much attention to them. Another day passed, but there was still no news from Sea Temple. This made Yang Kai a little impatient, and just as he was considering whether he should go to Sea Temple's headquarters in person, he suddenly frowned and spread out his divine sense. A few thousand kilometers away from Sunrise Island, there was a giant wave over 1,000 meters high that was rapidly approaching the island. This giant wave seemed to connect the heavens and the earth, giving off an extremely great momentum. Atop this wave, there were many creatures treading on it, each of them at least 100 in number. Among these 100 people, there were both men and women. The men were burly and did not seem to be from the human race. Each of them was at least 4 to 5 meters tall and had ugly and ferocious faces that would cause anyone who saw them to shudder. The women, on the other hand, were all beautiful, with flawless white skin and supple waists. Some were charming, some were pure, some were hot, some were sexy, some were enchanting, some were pure, and some were hot. What caught Yang Kai's attention though was that all of these people were masters at the Origin Returning Realm or above. Yang Kai thought they were masters from Sea Temple, but upon closer inspection, he found that this was not the case. These people were not from the human race. Yang Kai pondered for a moment before suddenly remembering something. In the deep sea of Shadowed Star, not only did the human race thrive, but there was also a race called the Sea Clan. The Sea Clan was just a general term that encompassed many branches. They were masters who were naturally proficient in water attribute secret arts and martial skills, and in the deep sea, they were giants. However, the Sea Clan rarely dealt with the human race, so there was no cultivator on Shadowed Star. In their entire lives, they might not even be able to see a single member of the sea race. Even the human race martial artists who lived in the deep sea rarely had the opportunity to encounter such creatures. Yang Kai observed for a while and found that there were at least 4 or 5 branches of the Sea Clan. Some of them were covered in scales, some had long barb-like tails, and some had arms that were shaped like crab pincers. They looked very strange. This was also the first time Yang Kai had seen a sea race group, so he couldn't help feeling a little surprised, wondering why they were rushing towards Sunrise Island in such an aggressive manner. After observing for a while, the burly sea race leader atop the giant wave seemed to notice something and his eyes flashed a terrifying light as he turned his gaze towards the void. It was as if he wanted to find out where Yang Kai was hiding. Yang Kai smiled and withdrew his gaze. To Yang Kai, no one on Shadowed Star was worth his attention. These 100 or so sea race masters at or above the Origin Returning Realm might be an extremely powerful force to Sea Temple, but to Yang Kai, they were nothing. Above. The burly sea race man frowned and glanced at the void thoughtfully, a suspicious look on his face. Shong Ao, did you discover something? Next to him, a woman wearing a voluptuous dress with more than 60% of her skin exposed to the air frowned and asked. Shong Ao slowly shook his head. It seems like someone is monitoring us, but there are no obvious signs. Perhaps I sensed wrongly. The woman was stunned. She knew Shong Ao's strength. As one of the commanders of the Sea Clan's Sea God Palace, he was one of the strongest masters on Shadowed Star and rarely made mistakes in his senses. However, since Shong Ao said so, the woman didn't ask any more questions and instead frowned deeply. But this time, I'm afraid things won't be easy. The princess went missing near Sunrise Island, and although it is very likely that she was taken away by the human race, what if they refuse to admit it? Shong Ao coldly snorted, if they dare not admit it, this commander will raze Sunrise Island to the ground. These humans should have already left the limitless ocean. This is my Sea Clan's territory. Ha! The woman sighed deeply. Her brow was filled with worry as she stared in the direction of Sunrise Island, secretly praying that her princess had really been taken away by the human race. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know where to start searching. This time, The Sea Clan had sent troops to Sunrise Island with the mentality of treating a dead horse as a living one. They were truly desperate, otherwise, with the power of Sea Temple, Sea God Palace wouldn't have dared to start a war. However, Shang Ao seemed to be certain that the princess had been taken away by the human race, so this trip would likely be difficult to resolve. It would be best if they could find the princess, but if they couldn't, the two races of the limitless ocean would really have to fight each other. The giant wave moved extremely quickly and pushed forward 100 kilometers in the blink of an eye. When the giant wave was about 1,000 kilometers away from Sunrise Island, Pang Zhen and the others also noticed the change in world energy and rushed out of their respective residences to look into the distance. A moment later, Pang Zhen's face changed greatly. These arrogant Sea Clan bastards dare attack Sunrise Island? Activate the defensive spirit array. As soon as this order was given, Sunrise Island immediately buzzed and soon, the huge island was covered in a layer of transparent energy. All the cultivators on the island also moved out and gathered around Pang Zhen, each of them wearing dignified expressions. Yang Kai didn't know what was going on, so naturally, he was curious and also came to Pang Zhen's side. Sect Master Yang, the Sea Clan has come to cause trouble. I must ask Sect Master Yang to withdraw. Pang Zhen tried to persuade him. Yang Kai's previous proposal was very much to his liking. Whether or not he could obtain a higher status in Sea Temple depended on whether Yang Kai's proposal was successful, so he was very concerned about Yang Kai, lest Yang Kai be implicated. It's fine, Island Master Pang can do as he pleases, I'll just take a look around, Yang Kai chuckled. Seeing him like this, Pang Zhen thought for a moment and no longer tried to persuade him. After all, Yang Kai had proven his strength before. Why is the Sea Clan so aggressive? Did Sunrise Island or Sea Temple provoke them? Yang Kai asked casually. Pang Zhen shook his head, I don't know, but there is no harmonious relationship between Sea Temple and the Sea Clan. After all, they are two different races that live together in the deep sea, so friction is inevitable. However, this Pang has never seen a situation like today's. My Sea Temple and the Sea Clan's Sea God Palace also have some agreements that prevent us from dispatching so many masters to deal with the other side. Yang Kai's eyes flashed a few times before he asked casually, the Sea Clan's Sea God Palace should also be able to collect a lot of cultivation resources from the deep sea, right? Pang Zhen was so focused on wondering why the Sea Clan had dispatched so many masters that he didn't have time to ponder over Yang Kai's question and simply said, they have a natural advantage in being able to collect resources from the deepest depths of the sea, something our Sea Temple cannot compare with. As soon as he finished speaking, Pang Zhen realized something and quickly turned to look at Yang Kai, only to find that he was smiling happily. Pang Zhen's expression couldn't help becoming serious as he said, Sect Master Yang, those who are not of our race are bound to have different intentions. The Sea Clan is not easy to deal with, so if you want to exchange any cultivation resources with them, I'm afraid it will be very difficult. The Sea Clan has always looked down on our human race. You have lived inland for a long time, so you probably don't understand this. Many thanks for Island Master Pang's reminder, Yang Kai responded casually. Pang Zhen naturally knew what Yang Kai was thinking and why Yang Kai would think this way. Yang Kai had been waiting here for several days now, yet no one from the Sea Clan's headquarters had come to discuss the matter of trading resources with him. Anyone would have been resentful. If Sea Temple was the sole ruler of the endless sea, Yang Kai would have had no choice but to wait patiently. But now that Sea God Palace had suddenly appeared, Pang Zhen knew that Yang Kai had set his sights on Sea God Palace. If he could establish a connection with Sea God Palace, it wouldn't matter whether he had Sea Temple or not. If he lost this merit, Pang Zhen would find it difficult to advance and could only remain on Sunrise Island as an island master for the rest of his life. Although he was free and unfettered, he was still some distance away from the true center of power. Seeing Yang Kai not take his words to heart, Pang Zhen also felt a little resentful. He didn't resent Yang Kai, but rather was dissatisfied with the attitude of the Sea Clan's headquarters. However, he didn't have time to think about this right now. While he was chatting with Yang Kai, the monstrous wave had already arrived a few kilometers in front of Sunrise Island and without stopping, rushed straight towards the island. Hong Long Long, Sunrise Island's spirit array restriction shook violently, nearly breaking apart. After a long time, The monstrous wave subsided and swept across the entire Sunrise Island before disappearing. Pang Zhen raised his head towards the sky with an ugly expression and shouted, "Shang-Ao, what do you mean by this? Does Sea God Palace want to declare war on my sea temple? Pang Zhen, hand over that person, otherwise I'll make sure your Sunrise Island will never be able to rest in peace." Shang-Ao roared, his voice like a clap of thunder, causing everyone's eardrums to ache. Pang Zhen was stunned. Hand over who? He had no idea what Shang-Ao was talking about and felt completely baffled. Don't play dumb, this general officer will give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. If you don't see the person this general officer wants to see, you can just wait for your death. Although Shang-Ao was strong, he was obviously simple-minded. Once he set his mind on something, no matter what others said, it was useless. Now, he was certain that the person he was looking for was on Sunrise Island. Shang-Ao being so rude and unreasonable angered Pang Zhen greatly, and he sneered coldly, "This island master doesn't know who you're talking about, and even if he did, this island master wouldn't hand her over to you." Pang Zhen was a third-order origin returning realm master, an island master. Shang-Ao had come here to cause trouble for no reason and even dared to threaten him, so he naturally wouldn't back down. "Good, since you said so, don't blame this general for being ruthless." Shang-Ao's face became fierce, and just as he was about to begin a slaughter, the scantily clad woman beside him suddenly pulled him back. "Wait a moment." Although Shang-Ao's expression was unpleasant, he didn't refute her words and instead stood mid-air with an angry look on his face as he squinted towards the people below, his eyes filled with contempt. He seemed to look down on everyone, even Pang Zhen, but when he saw Yang Kai, his eyes narrowed slightly as a look of suspicion appeared on his face. Yang Kai, who had a harmless smile on his face, gave him a very dangerous feeling. This caused Shang-Ao to take a few more glances at Yang Kai. Chapter 1701. Although the existence of Yang Kai had caught Shang-Ao's attention, he did not pay much attention to him. The sea race was an arrogant race. They had always thought that they, who were born in the sea, were the noblest creatures in the world. All other races should bow down to them, especially the human race, which had a large population. They were qualified to be so arrogant. Every sea clan member, from the day they were born, was naturally proficient in water attribute secret arts and martial skills, unlike the human race. Many sea clan members never cultivated in their entire lives and could not escape death, forever living as ordinary people. For the first time, Yang Kai experienced the arrogance of the sea clan. The beautiful woman standing next to Shang-Ao looked down and lightly opened her lips. "Island Master Pang, this is not the first time this mistress and you have met. Since everyone knows each other's roots, this mistress will speak frankly. An important person from my Sea God Palace has gone missing near your Sunrise Island. We have reason to suspect that Sea Temple's people have abducted this important person, so we ask Island Master Pang to hand over this person." Although the woman tried to keep her tone as calm as possible, her expression inadvertently revealed her inner anxiety. Pang Zhen naturally recognized this sea clan woman and frowned. "An important person from your sea clan? Who is it?" He was very curious about the identity of this missing sea clan master and faintly felt that this person's status in the sea clan was definitely not low, most likely a member of the royal family. Otherwise, Shang-Ao and this woman would not have come together in such an aggressive manner. No matter what, he had to find out. The woman shook her head gently and said in a pleasant voice, "Sorry, this mistress cannot tell you who it is." Pang Zhen sneered, "Great Commander Qian Mo, are you sure you're not joking? Based on your guess, so many origin returning realm masters from Sea God Palace came to embarrass my Sunrise Island. Do you think my sea temple is easy to bully?" The woman named Qian Mo frowned slightly and hesitated for a moment before saying, "This is not just this mistress' guess. The master disappeared near Sunrise Island, otherwise, we would not have rushed here." Pang Zhen's eyes shrank. Qian Mo was one of the 8 great commanders of Sea God Palace. She was an existence on the same level as Shang-Ao and had a venerated status. In the Sea Clan, there were not many people with higher status than her. Yet, she still had to address the missing sea race as master. Could it be that a member of the Sea God Palace's royal family had really gone missing? This was no small matter. Pang Zhen immediately realized the seriousness of the problem. If it was just a little-known member of the sea race, he could just ignore it. After all, he really hadn't seen him before. But if it was a member of the royal family, he couldn't do that. If this matter was not handled properly, it would definitely trigger a war between Supreme Ocean Palace and Sea God Palace. That was an outcome that no one wanted to see. After pondering for a long time, Pangzhen said with a solemn expression, "My Sunrise Island has not seen any sea race members recently." Perhaps Commander Qian Mo was mistaken. Qian Mo interrupted him, "If it is convenient for Island Master Pang, this mistress would like to search Sunrise Island. Is that okay? Just searching?" Pangzhen looked at her carefully. Compared to the current situation, this request was not too much. If it was any other occasion, at any other time, Pangzhen definitely wouldn't agree, but since it involved a member of the royal family, if he didn't agree, it would most likely trigger Shang Ao's simple yet sturdy nerves, and a great battle would ensue. As such, Pangzhen had to make some concessions. "Just searching," Qian Mo promised. "This mistress is very familiar with that master, if she really is on Sunrise Island. This mistress will definitely be able to sense it, whether or not someone is hiding her." When she said this last sentence, Qian Mo's eyes became as sharp as a blade. It was easy to imagine that if things were really as she guessed, Sunrise Island would be bathed in blood today. Pangzhen hesitated. With the other party speaking so confidently, he didn't dare to be too sure of his own judgment. Although he was the island master, there were so many disciples of Supreme Ocean Palace living on Sunrise Island. If one of them was blind enough to secretly bring back a member of the sea race, all right. "I agree," Pangzhen quickly said. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, it couldn't be avoided, so Pangzhen could only hope that the sea race's guess was wrong. "Many thanks." Qian Mo nodded and then released her divine sense, spreading it inch by inch across Sunrise Island. Everyone waited quietly. On the vast coast, there were hundreds of masters, but none of them spoke. Even their breathing was suppressed, to the point where one could hear a pin drop. Shang Ao was so anxious that he felt like he was constipated, the scar on his face becoming more and more terrifying as he glanced between Qian Mo and Pangzhen, his eyes wide open. After a long time, Qian Mo suddenly opened her eyes. Pangzhen's expression became serious as he stared at her without blinking. "How is it?" Shang Ao hurriedly asked. Qian Mo showed a look of disappointment as she turned to Shang Ao and slowly shook her head. "She's not here." "Impossible!" Shang Ao shouted. "She disappeared near Sunrise Island. How could she not be here? There must be some kind of mistake." "Right, did they move her somewhere else?" Sunrise Island has a space array that allows passage between the various islands of Sea Temple. "Shang Ao, if you want to fight then fight, don't be so noisy," Pangzhen shouted angrily, this time with much more confidence. Shang Ao was already annoyed to begin with, so Pangzhen's words were undoubtedly aimed at him, causing him to glare fiercely as the surging strength in his body surged. Qian Mo was the first to speak. "Island Master Pang, this time this mistress and the others made a mistake. This mistress apologizes for the trouble this mistress has caused to your esteemed island. This mistress will definitely come to apologize again in the future." Hearing her say this, Pangzhen's complexion improved greatly. The sea race had always looked down on the human race, so Qian Mo being able to say such words clearly showed how anxious she was and was no longer in the mood to maintain her arrogance. As for whether or not she would really come to apologize in the future, that was no longer important. Pangzhen was also a shrewd person, so he naturally understood when to stop and gently nodded. "Since that's the case, please forgive this Pang for not seeing you out. Have a safe trip." The sea race masters did not say a word and quickly retreated. Only Shang Ao glanced at Pangzhen unwillingly before leaving, as if he couldn't wait to have a big fight to vent the bitterness in his heart. After the sea race masters retreated 1,000 kilometers away, Pangzhen breathed a sigh of relief. The other leaders of Sunrise Island also looked at each other with bitter smiles on their faces, cold sweat dripping down their backs. Don't be fooled by their tough attitude just now. In fact, everyone's hearts were in their throats. With Sunrise Island's current strength, it wouldn't be easy for them to resist the elites led by the two Sea Clan great commanders. Fortunately, in the end, the matter was resolved perfectly and no real battle broke out. "Island Master, who from the sea race went missing?" Why are both Shang-ao and Qian Mo so nervous? Someone asked from the side. Pang Zhen winked at this person but did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Yang Kai with a smile and said, Sect Master Yang, this Pang has just received news that the people from the Sea Race's headquarters will arrive on Sunrise Island in 3 days. I hope Sect Master Yang can be patient and stay on Sunrise Island for a few more days. Yang Kai smiled lightly. This Yang will naturally accept Island Master Pang's hospitality, but your Sea Race doesn't seem too interested in this Yang's proposal. Pang Zhen opened his mouth but didn't know how to explain. From his point of view, Sea Temple had indeed been somewhat negligent, so he could only smile awkwardly. Fortunately, Yang Kai did not intend to embarrass him and simply said a few words before taking his leave and returning to the place Pang Zhen had arranged for him. Since Sea Temple was not enthusiastic about his proposal, Yang Kai would not ask them for help and instead turned his attention to the Sea Clan. Pang Zhen also said that the Sea Clan had a natural advantage and could mine far more cultivation resources than Sea Temple. If the Sea Clan could reach a cooperative relationship with High Heaven Sect, their future would be much brighter than if they cooperated with Sea Temple. However, if he wanted to cooperate with the Sea Clan, it would be very difficult. Unless he directly used force to subdue them, there was probably no possibility of success. Late at night, Yang Kai opened his eyes and stared thoughtfully in a certain direction. Just now, he noticed that Pang Zhen and some of the masters from Sunrise Island had left the island, but he didn't know what they were going to do. However, Yang Kai guessed that they were looking for the missing important figure from the Sea Clan. For Shang-ao and Qian Mo to attach so much importance to this person, their status was definitely not low. If Pang Zhen could find them, it would undoubtedly be a great merit. At that time, whether it was using them to negotiate with Sea God Palace or to exchange for some supplies, it would be a simple matter. From what Yang Kai could perceive, the masters from the Sea Clan had not gone too far from Sunrise Island, only moving about 30,000 kilometers away. They seemed to be certain that their clansmen had gone missing near Sunrise Island, so they were only searching within this area. Yang Kai watched with interest and secretly wondered what kind of scene it would be if the two sides met. However, this idea was obviously superfluous. Whether it was the cultivator from Sunrise Island or the cultivator from the Sea Clan, both sides were trying their best to avoid interfering with each other. Suddenly, an aura suddenly disappeared from Yang Kai's perception. Before he could figure out what was going on, another aura disappeared, followed by a third, a fourth. In just a short time, the auras of more than a dozen creatures had mysteriously disappeared. This wasn't the annihilation of death, but the complete disappearance of one's soul. Yang Kai was stunned. He was now the Star Master of Shadowed Star, so as long as he wanted to, he could monitor the movements of any place he wanted to. However, he had not been able to figure out how these creatures had disappeared. They had simply disappeared for no reason. Even their companions had not noticed. At first, only the Sea Clan disappeared, but soon, the masters from Sunrise Island also disappeared one after another. By the time the remaining people realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. Of the 100 to 200 masters from the two clans, only a few were left. In the next few moments, these people had disappeared, as if they had never existed. Chapter 1702. Yang Kai suddenly got up and his figure flickered, flying directly from Sunrise Island to the territory where the incident had occurred. Floating mid-air, Yang Kai furrowed his brow as he frantically spread his divine sense outwards, trying to find the real reason for the disappearance of these creatures. Such a strange phenomenon appearing in this territory made Yang Kai, the sect master of Shadowed Star, both confused and shocked. Yang Kai stood quietly mid-air, not missing any details, but still could not find any clues. The surrounding heaven and earth was filled with a creepy and mysterious atmosphere that made one's hair stand on end. At a certain moment though, Yang Kai's face suddenly changed slightly as he turned his head to look in a certain direction. In that direction, an island shrouded in shadows had strangely appeared. This island was hazy, like the moon in the water or flowers in the fog, making it impossible to see clearly. No matter how Yang Kai condensed his divine sense, he was unable to grasp any trace of it. It was as if this island did not exist, its distance fluctuating, but it was filled with an inexplicable aura. A dark hole silently split open behind Yang Kai, and by the time Yang Kai noticed, it was already too late. The dark hole was like the maw of a fierce beast, swallowing Yang Kai in one gulp. After that, it disappeared. A strong wind blew and ripples appeared on the surface of the sea, but within a radius of several tens of thousands of kilometers, there were no longer any signs of life. The place where Yang Kai reappeared was a sandy beach with the usual humidity and smell of the sea. Before Yang Kai could figure out what was going on though, he heard the sound of fighting, some of which sounded familiar to him. Looking towards the source of these voices, Yang Kai quickly found that a large number of the human race and sea clan masters who had disappeared from his senses were on this beach. Pang Zhen, Shong Ao, and Qian Mo were among them. However, their situation was very bad as they were being besieged by a group of unknown cultivators. Although Sea Temple and Sea God Palace were not on good terms with each other, with friction occurring every year, they at least knew each other well. Now that they had suddenly fallen into such a predicament, they naturally put aside their former enmity and worked together to fight. There were not many people besieging them, only around 30 to 40 of them. But even so, the powerhouses of Supreme Ocean Temple and Sea God's Palace were still retreating, if it wasn't for the fact that those people of unknown origin didn't have the intention to kill them all. Pang Zhen, Shong Ao, and the rest would most likely suffer heavy losses. Yang Kai found this situation quite strange as he found that none of these people showed any signs of using their Saint Qi. Instead, they were all fighting with their own physical strength. It wasn't just the cultivator with unknown origins. Pang Zhen, Shong Ao, and the others were the same. Shong Ao was tall and strong. As a member of the Sea Clan, the quality of his physical body was extremely strong, so even if he was besieged by 4 or 5 enemies, he could still barely cope. He wouldn't be defeated so quickly. Pang Zhen, on the other hand, was in a difficult situation. In terms of combat power, he was actually not much worse than Shong Ao, but without being able to use his Saint Qi, his combat effectiveness plummeted, causing him to be forced into a corner. The other human race cultivator was the same. Without the natural advantage of the Sea Clan's physical strength, not only were they no match for the Sea Clan's men, but they were also no match for a woman like Qian Mo. Yang Kai pondered for a moment before trying to circulate his Saint Qi, but was surprised to find that the Saint Qi in his body remained motionless. This strange place actually had a power that restricted his Saint Qi. This discovery startled him. Yang Kai tried to use his divine sense but found that his divine sense could only extend 500 meters out of his body. What was this place? Why was there such a powerful restriction on his Saint Qi and divine sense? Yang Kai was puzzled. 2 people nearby saw that Yang Kai wasn't very old and grinned wickedly as they attacked him from the left and right. Yang Kai hadn't figured out the situation here yet, but he didn't want to show off too much, so while dealing with these 2, he secretly scanned his surroundings. In terms of physical strength alone, Yang Kai could be said to be a top-level existence. The life-revitalizing jade cream he brought out from the Emperor Garden was not for nothing, and he also had a large amount of golden blood in his body. Coupled with his 5 elements indestructible sword tempering art, it could be said that in terms of pure physical strength, he could even face an origin king without fear. Yang Kai was now certain that this was not Shadowed Star, or rather, this place was no longer under the control of Shadowed Star. Because even his connection with Shadowed Star had been severed, he could not take advantage of the various conveniences of the Star Master to act. This was definitely an independent, sealed space. The battle was in full swing as both sides fought fiercely. Constantly, a human or Sea Clan cultivator was captured, tied up, and sent to the side. However, Shong Ao and the others were still struggling to resist, injuring many of their enemies. A tall, skinny man stood nearby and watched. Seeing that his subordinates were unable to resolve the battle after such a long time, he couldn't sit still any longer and sneered, "As soon as you enter Serene Soul Island, you are separated from the heavens. Don't resist and obediently follow this king to see Island Master. As long as you are obedient, Island Master will not embarrass you." Serene Soul Island? Pang Zhen, Shong Ao, and Qian Mo exclaimed at the same time, all of their faces turning extremely pale. Even Yang Kai was shocked. This place is actually Serene Soul Island. He couldn't believe it. He had long heard of the name Serene Soul Island. There were originally 3 restricted zones on Shadowed Star. One was the Liu Yang Sandfield, the second was the Emperor Garden, and the third was Serene Soul Island. Needless to say, the Liu Yang Sandfield was originally a place that opened once every few hundred years for the younger generation cultivator of various great forces to enter for life experience. Normally, no one could enter it. The Emperor Garden was also a famous place. It was the private home of Starfield's great emperors. The last time it opened, many geniuses gathered in Star territory and obtained great benefits from it. Serene Soul Island was different from the other 2. The other 2 were places where one could experience life experience and obtain benefits, but Serene Soul Island was a land of death. It was rumored that Serene Soul Island existed in the limitless ocean, but no one had ever seen it. Anyone who had seen it had disappeared, never to return, as if they had evaporated into thin air. Many Shadowed Star cultivator doubted whether Serene Soul Island really existed because no one could provide any evidence to prove it. Serene Soul Island. It only existed in legends. But now, this thin man actually said that this place was Serene Soul Island. How could Pang Zhen, Shong Ao, and the others not be shocked? They were all creatures who had lived in the deep sea for a long time and were familiar with all kinds of legends, so when they heard the word Serene Soul Island, all of them turned pale. If this place was really Serene Soul Island, it meant that the legends were true, and they would never be able to return to the limitless ocean. They would be trapped in this damned place where they could not use their Saint Chi and their divine sense was infinitely suppressed. Furthermore, they would have to obey the orders of an unknown island master. This was something no master could tolerate. Indeed. This is indeed Serene Soul Island. The thin man was very satisfied with everyone's reaction. He had the same reaction when he heard the news when he was trapped in this place. Calculating the time, he thought. He couldn't remember how long it had been. Shong Ao and Pang Zhen glanced at each other. Both of them roared in unison, "Only a fool would believe you." Stubborn fools. The thin man coldly snorted, not wanting to waste any more time, and stepped forward. His entire body was emitting an aura that made people raise their eyebrows. With a casual wave of his hand, the few human race and sea clan masters who stood in his way were smashed to pieces without being able to put up the slightest resistance. He didn't use his Saint Chi, instead relying on his brute physical strength. Shong Ao's eyes narrowed as a solemn expression appeared on his face. He could tell how powerful this lanky man was. That skinny body of his was actually able to produce such an unimaginable amount of strength. The thin man only took a few steps forward before arriving in front of Shong Ao. He wanted to kill a chicken to warn the monkeys, so naturally he wanted to kill Shong Ao. After all, Shong Ao seemed to be the strongest among this group. He didn't make any special movements. He simply threw out a punch towards Shong Ao's face. His punch caused the air to explode. Shong Ao roared as his burly body stood in place like a wooden stake, clenching his fists and crossing them in front of him to block. Hong. The thin man's fist slammed into Shong Ao's arms, causing the sound of bones breaking to ring out. Shong Ao's burly body was sent flying like a broken kite before crashing heavily to the ground. When he struggled to stand up, his eyes and nose were full of blood, giving him a ferocious appearance. After swaying for a moment, he fell backwards. Everyone was in an uproar, all of them showing looks of horror. The human race and sea clan masters who were still resisting stopped what they were doing one after another. This thin man could knock out Shong Ao with a single punch, so killing them would be a piece of cake for him. Even Pang Zhen, after changing his expression a few times, signaled to the sea temple cultivators with his eyes, telling them to give up resisting. In the face of absolute strength, resistance was meaningless and would only increase the number of casualties. Seeing this, the thin man showed a satisfied expression and laughed. "A wise man submits to circumstances, very good. Don't worry, this king doesn't want to kill you all. Serene Soul Island hasn't had anyone here for a long time, so your arrival is just in time to replenish the population here. The island master doesn't allow anyone to kill. Of course, the premise is that you all must be obedient. Perhaps soon, we can even become companions. Stay here for a while and you will know what kind of place Serene Soul Island is." He smiled happily. The faces of the human race and sea clan masters were ugly. Yang Kai frowned slightly as his expression changed a few times before he quickly made a decision. He did not intend to be manipulated by this thin man. Whether or not this place was Serene Soul Island, he had to take the initiative in his own hands. Thinking so, he made a feint and directly escaped from the battle, quickly running away. This action finally caused the thin man to notice Yang Kai's existence, causing his face to sink as he coldly snorted, "You don't know what's good for you, go kill him." Yang Kai's actions had undoubtedly annoyed him, so his last sentence was directed at his two subordinates. Receiving the order, the two of them quickly chased after Yang Kai. The Sea Clan masters did not recognize Yang Kai and only thought that he was a disciple of Sea Palace, so they only glanced at Yang Kai's back and did not pay much attention to him. On the other hand, Pang Zhen was stunned, wondering why Yang Kai would appear here. But now that he could not even protect himself, he did not have the spare time to think about Yang Kai, so he just stood there with a pale face. Chapter 1703. As soon as the skinny man in the lead gave the order, his subordinates immediately rushed forward and tied up the remaining human and sea race cultivators, but those who resisted were beaten black and blue. Regardless of the cultivation of these people who followed the slender leader, without exception, all of them had physiques far superior to those of the outside world, so the human and sea race cultivators had no chance to resist and were quickly suppressed. The slender leader put on a fake smile and said, "Be obedient and there will be benefits for you, but if you dare to act rashly, many people die on Serene Soul Island every year, think carefully." Pang Zhen, Qian Mo, and the others' faces sank as a bad feeling welled up in their hearts. 100 kilometers away, Yang Kai frowned as he looked at the two corpses on the ground and sighed slightly. He had just arrived and didn't want to start a massacre. But the two people who had chased after him were unwilling to let him go. They looked like they were determined to kill him. With no other choice, Kai Yang had no choice but to kill them. Without using Saint Chi, those who could fight Yang Kai with their physical strength were probably less than 5 in the entire star territory, so how could these two unknown minions be Yang Kai's opponent? After a few moves, they were lying on the ground. Yang Kai plundered their space rings before quickly leaving in a certain direction. Half an hour later, another cultivator arrived and after seeing the two corpses on the ground, his expression changed and he quickly returned to Serene Soul Island to report the situation. At this time, Yang Kai was already a few hundred kilometers away. In a natural cave on the coast, Yang Kai sat cross-legged. This cave was relatively damp and not suitable for living, but Yang Kai couldn't care less. Sitting on the ground, Yang Kai tried to circulate his Saint Chi and communicate with Shadowed Star, but to no avail. All failed. This strange place really cut off his connection with Shadowed Star, depriving him of his greatest advantage. Yang Kai's face turned ugly. Fortunately, although his divine sense was infinitely suppressed, he could still use it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to take out anything from his space ring, let alone use the artifacts he had been nurturing inside his body. Whether it was using space rings or artifacts, they all required a certain level of divine sense as a bridge. Once divine sense could not be used, these external forces would not be able to be used. This made Yang Kai feel slightly relieved. After thinking about it for a moment, Yang Kai took out the space rings of the two people he had killed before and began checking their belongings. With Yang Kai's current net worth, he naturally wouldn't care about the wealth of two ordinary cultivator. However, Yang Kai could use these two people's belongings to investigate the situation on Shadowed Soul Island, so before leaving, Yang Kai took their space rings with him. The original cultivations of these two were not very high, so the barriers on their space rings were easily broken by Yang Kai. Carefully rummaging through their rings, Kai Yang discovered that these two fellows were relatively poor. Aside from some food, there was nothing else in their rings. Apart from their rings, there were only a few saint crystals, a few low-grade artifacts, some martial arts records that Yang Kai didn't care about, and a few jade bottles. Saint crystals were completely useless here. Yang Kai couldn't even use his Saint Chi here, so how could saint crystals play a role? Yang Kai didn't care about the artifacts and martial arts records. He took out the jade bottles, opened the caps, and poured out a grey pill from the bottle. As soon as it entered his hand, Yang Kai curled his lips disdainfully. With his current identity as an Origin King-grade alchemist, he could naturally see at a glance that the refinement of this pill was incomplete. Although it couldn't be said to be a failure, it definitely didn't display the full efficacy of the raw materials. The refinement technique was very rough, and the medicinal efficacies of the raw materials were not even fully condensed. This medicinal pill was a failed product that was formed by mixing several different ingredients together at will. However, Yang Kai remembered that he couldn't use his Saint Chi in this damned place. Yang Kai was relieved. Without being able to use Saint Chi, alchemists had no way to condense medicinal liquids and fully display the effects of the raw materials. This was probably the reason. As a result, the refinement of this pill was incomplete. Although with Yang Kai's vision and level of expertise, he didn't care about this kind of spirit pill at all, he was still very curious about its function. None of the spirit pills he had mastered so far matched the one in front of him, which made him feel a little surprised. After observing for a while and smelling the scent of this pill, Yang Kai determined that it was not poisonous and simply threw it into his mouth. After a while, Yang Kai raised his brow and showed a look of amazement, muttering, "So that's how it is. No wonder the physiques of each of them are so good, it turns out it was because of this pill." After tasting it, Yang Kai immediately understood the purpose of this pill. It was actually a pill used for body tempering. After taking this pill, Yang Kai clearly felt a stream of heat rise from his lower abdomen and flow into his limbs, transforming his 5 viscera, 6 organs, and tendons, allowing his body to develop in a better direction. The effect of this pill on Yang Kai was negligible, almost negligible. But for those cultivator who had not specifically tempered their physique, it was of some help. If they could take this pill over a long period of time, it would definitely improve their physique. This was probably the fundamental reason why the cultivator living on Serene Soul Island had a much stronger physique than the average human or Sea Clan cultivator. They should have all taken this spirit pill. Saint Chi could not be used on Serene Soul Island, and one's divine sense was suppressed to the limit, but the cultivator living here had found another way to become stronger. Everything was not without reason. Yang Kai was also very interested in this pill. However, he did not know the pill recipe or the raw materials, so he could only put it aside for the time being. Outside the cave, Yang Kai looked into the distance and could vaguely see a city in the center of Serene Soul Island. This should be where the residents of Serene Soul Island lived. In the center of this city, there was an extremely tall building that almost reached into the sky. Yang Kai withdrew his gaze and looked at the rolling sea. Without hesitating for long, he jumped into the sea and swam forward using his hands and feet. Under the premise that he could not use his Saint Chi, he could only rely on this most primitive method to go out to sea. Now, he could judge that Serene Soul Island was definitely an independent sealed space. Just like the floating continent he had entered when he first entered Star Territory, this place had its own world principles that were not affected by Shadowed Star's interference. Since it was an independent sealed space, there should be a limit. Yang Kai wanted to find this limit and see if he could break it to escape. Even if he failed, Yang Kai could still go back and think of a way. For example, he could go deep into the city and find the island master of Serene Soul Island to ask about the situation. Presumably, the island master knew more about this place than he did. The sea was cold and Yang Kai's speed was extremely fast. There were many ferocious sea beasts that lived in the sea. Under Yang Kai's fists and feet, they were all reduced to dust. Over the next few days, Yang Kai discovered that these sea beasts were different from those in the outside world. Their physiques also seemed to be far stronger than those of their kind in the outside world. Killing them in the sea really took Yang Kai a lot of effort. Over the past few days, Yang Kai would occasionally find a few ships out to sea wandering around a certain part of Star Territory. Those should be the ships of Shadowed Soul Island's residents, and seeing them bustle about, Yang Kai couldn't help but wonder. They seemed to be looking for something in the sea with great concentration. Yang Kai didn't want to expose his whereabouts, so he tried to avoid them as much as possible. These ships could only move around near the coast. They didn't dare to move a little further. After all, the deeper they went into the sea, the greater the danger they would encounter. These sea beasts couldn't withstand Yang Kai's attacks. But that didn't mean that they were weak. For the next few days, Yang Kai found nothing. Gradually, he could no longer see anyone. However, he didn't give up and continued to explore ahead. On this day, in the vast sea, Yang Kai suddenly found something. He hurriedly focused his attention and looked ahead. A multicolored light pierced through the thin mist and entered Kai Yang's line of sight. Yang Kai was suddenly in high spirits and quickly rushed in that direction. After a few days, all he could see was the same scenery. Or rather, there was no scenery at all. This was also a kind of torture for Yang Kai. Now that there was a sudden change, he was naturally very happy. No matter what the colorful light was, it was better than the unchanging sea. In a short while, Yang Kai arrived at the place. However, the scene he saw made Yang Kai slightly absent-minded. In this sea, there was a lotus. Roughly counting, there were at least a few dozen lotuses of different colors blooming on the surface of the sea. There were pink, green, silver, and golden lotuses, and every single one of them was emitting dense spiritual energy. Sea lotus. Yang Kai frowned. However, this was obviously not an ordinary sea lotus, but a precious alchemy material. Yang Kai's eyes lit up. He swam forward and came to a cyan sea lotus. He reached out and dropped a petal, putting it in his mouth and chewing. After a while, his eyes became brighter and he couldn't help laughing. So the main ingredient of the alchemy is this. He had been very interested in this special spirit pill before, but unfortunately, he didn't know what the raw material was. He didn't expect that this trip to the sea would be so easy to find. Thinking about it, the several ships he had encountered before should also be looking for this kind of sea lotus. Unfortunately, they could only operate near the coast and missed this ocean link pond. Yang Kai happily picked these sea lotuses, stored them in a special way, and put them into his space ring. After some investigation, he found that these sea lotuses had obvious differences in their medicinal efficacies according to their color. The pink ones had the lowest medicinal efficacies, followed by the cyan ones, silver ones, and gold ones. The stronger the medicinal efficacies of the sea lotus, the fewer there were. There was only one golden sea lotus, and it stood in the center of the ocean link pond, admiring itself. There were also not many silver sea lotuses, only 6 in total, all of which were extremely precious. These materials could play a huge role in Yang Kai's hands. With his current level, he could infer the body-tempering pill's pill recipe and refine it himself. Yang Kai didn't intend to let go of any sea lotus. Chapter 1704. Just as Yang Kai was enjoying himself, he suddenly heard the sound of a fish splashing against the water nearby. Looking over, he found a dolphin about a meter long swimming over and swallowing one of the blue sea lotuses in one gulp. Although most of its body was hidden in the sea, this dolphin-like creature's posture was very elegant, and even the way it chewed the sea lotus was slow. Seeing Yang Kai looking at it, the little dolphin blinked its eyes and showed no signs of fear, slapping its tail against the water as it swam slowly towards another pink sea lotus. A moment later, the pink sea lotus was also swallowed by it. The little dolphin seemed to be in a good mood, and even the speed at which it swung its tail became much faster. Yang Kai wanted to drive it away, but after hesitating for a moment, he decided against it. Since entering the sea, all the sea beasts he had encountered had been fierce and vicious without exception, all of them attacking him without any hesitation. This little dolphin looked harmless to humans and animals, and Yang Kai didn't sense any danger from it, so he simply let it be. One person and one dolphin, working separately, quickly collected the sea lotuses. The 6 silver lotuses and the golden lotus were all collected by Yang Kai, and the little dolphin only managed to pick up a few leftovers. It seemed to be a little unhappy as it boldly swam to Yang Kai's side and circled around him, constantly making strange noises. Yang Kai couldn't help laughing, and after the little dolphin nudged him with its head once, he had no choice but to take out a blue lotus from his space ring. He couldn't refuse the little dolphin's eager eyes. The little dolphin's eyes lit up in an instant and it began making urgent noises, like a baby waiting to be fed. Yang Kai brought the blue lotus to its mouth and the little dolphin swallowed it in one gulp, its eyes narrowing into crescents, making for a beautiful sight. After the blue lotus entered its stomach, The little dolphin burped in satisfaction and swam around Yang Kai even faster. It was much more intimate than before. Yang Kai grinned. After being soaked in the sea for several days, his cold body seemed to have warmed up a lot. Not far away, the seawater was parted and rapidly approached in a straight line. There seems to be some beast under the sea, smelling the scent of Yang Kai and the little dolphin, arousing its appetite. The little dolphin was very sensitive to danger and immediately hid behind Yang Kai. It stuck out half of its head and looked in that direction, its eyes showing human-like horror. Yang Kai reached out and patted it, signaling it to calm down. His eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the approaching sea beast. A moment later, a monstrous wave rose into the sky. A horrifyingly large shark-like sea beast leaped up from the bottom of the sea. It opened its gigantic mouth, and its sawtooth-like teeth gleamed with a sharp light. It bit towards Yang Kai viciously. The little dolphin's tail swung violently as it made anxious and hurried sounds. Yang Kai didn't move at all. He waited until the sea beast was about a meter away from him before he suddenly punched out, hitting the sea beast's forehead with lightning speed. With Yang Kai as the center, the seawater nearby suddenly dropped, and a circle of ripples quickly spread in all directions. Boom, at a speed visible to the naked eye. The seemingly majestic sea beast's forehead caved in, and its huge body also collapsed into a ball. Immediately, under the tremendous force, it flew hundreds of meters away before it crashed into the sea. Soon, dark red blood seeped out from the other side. The huge sea beast floated up with its belly turned over, motionless. The little dolphin was obviously stunned for a moment. Its two extremely bright eyes looked at Yang Kai, then at the sea beast in the distance, and then back at Yang Kai. It seemed to be unable to understand. How could such a small Yang Kai beat such a big sea beast? The size of the two was simply on the same level. However, it obviously didn't think much about this issue. Instead, it looked at Yang Kai with worshipful eyes, and made a sound of joy from its mouth. It then swam in front of Yang Kai and used its head to nudge Yang Kai's body. Yang Kai looked at it in amazement, not quite understanding what it wanted to do. The little dolphin continued to nudge. After a long time, Yang Kai finally understood. He pointed to the back of the little dolphin and asked, "You want me to go up?" The little dolphin nodded vigorously. Yang Kai's expression was strange. Looking at its 3-feet-long body, he hesitated and said, "That's not very good. Aren't you a little too small?" He was afraid that the little dolphin couldn't carry him. The little dolphin didn't allow him to say anything and dove into the sea. The next moment, Yang Kai felt that he was being lifted up by something and was slowly rising. After a while, half of the little dolphin's body came out of the water. It cried out happily as it swam forward quickly. Riding the wind and breaking the waves, it was fast and steady. Yang Kai clicked his tongue in wonder. "I have underestimated you." The little dolphin's swimming speed in the sea was more than 10 times faster than his. When it moved forward, the sea seemed to take the initiative to part to both sides, without adding any resistance to it. The little dolphin looked back proudly and glanced at Yang Kai with a look that said, "Praise me more." Yang Kai laughed and stood on the little dolphin with peace of mind, letting it fly forward with him. He didn't know what kind of creature this dolphin-like little thing was. Judging from its cowardly behavior just now, it would be very difficult for it to survive in such an environment. However, it was able to understand his words, which meant that its intelligence wasn't low. At the very least, it wasn't inferior to a 7 or 8-year-old child. However, with the little dolphin as a ride, Yang Kai felt a lot more relaxed. At least he didn't have to soak in the sea all day. As for why it was so intimate with him and even asked him to sit on it, it must know that without his protection, it would be difficult to survive here. This was also a kind of cooperation, a win-win situation. Yang Kai thought that the little dolphin wouldn't be of much use except as a ride, but soon he found that he was wrong. He was very wrong. This little thing swam freely in the sea, seemingly without any order or purpose, but it could always bring Yang Kai to some sea lotuses scattered in the deep sea. Yang Kai initially thought that it was just luck, but 2 days later, he found that this was the little dolphin's ability. It seemed to be able to accurately find the location of the sea lotuses from thousands of miles away. Yang Kai had a great harvest. In addition to the dozens of sea lotuses he found at the beginning, in the next few days, he harvested at least 100 more. The number of pink and green sea lotuses was still the most. There were fewer silver sea lotuses and only 3 golden ones. This was a rare commodity worth hoarding. These things were a specialty of Serene Soul Island and couldn't be found anywhere. Using these sea lotuses, Yang Kai could refine a large number of body-tempering pills. Not only could it enhance his own strength, but it could also quickly improve the physical quality of his friends and family. Therefore, the more sea lotuses there were, the better. The little dolphin also ate until its belly was round. It was the one who brought Yang Kai to find the sea lotuses, so Yang Kai naturally wouldn't stop it from eating. Time flew by, and about half a month later, Yang Kai stored at least 500 sea lotuses in his space ring. Although he didn't know the value of sea lotuses on Serene Soul Island, just by thinking about the rate of sea lotuses near and far, he could determine that these things should be a scarce resource on Serene Soul Island. Unless Serene Soul Island organized a team of masters to explore the sea and collect them, they would be able to obtain a considerable harvest. Otherwise, they could only search near the coast. On this day, the little dolphin brought Yang Kai to an island. This island didn't occupy a large area, only a few dozen kilometers in radius, less than 1% of Serene Soul Island. This was the first time Yang Kai had seen an island other than Serene Soul Island, so he was naturally very curious. The island was connected to the sea by a sea river that led directly to the interior of the island. The little dolphin followed the sea river and entered the island. A moment later, a lake on the island appeared in front of Yang Kai. This lake was connected to the sea outside, occupying about 1/5 of the island's area. Countless sea lotuses were blooming, dazzling the eyes with a variety of colors. Roughly counting, there were at least 1,000 sea lotuses in this lake. Yang Kai's eyes lit up. Even though Yang Kai had a great harvest these past few days, he couldn't help but smile. Good job. Yang Kai sat cross-legged on the little dolphin and patted its head. He wasn't stingy with his praise. The little dolphin was very happy. After spending these past few days together, the little dolphin had become more and more dependent on Yang Kai, especially after Yang Kai casually killed so many sea beasts. It couldn't help but worship Yang Kai. Those sea beasts were behemoths to the little dolphin, each of them capable of eating it alive. But for Yang Kai, a single punch was enough to kill them. Soon, the man and the dolphin arrived at the island's lake. Yang Kai jumped down, stepped on the lotus leaves, and quickly shuttled through the lake. Sea lotuses of different colors were collected into his space ring one after another. The little dolphin was not willing to be outdone and began devouring the sea lotuses, its belly soon becoming round. Then it began to swim in the lake with nothing to do, looking carefree and carefree. In less than an hour, Yang Kai had collected more than 2/3 of the sea lotuses in the lake. Just as he was full of energy and was about to sweep this place clean, a thunderous roar suddenly rang out in his ears. This roar was filled with blood and tears, as well as indescribable grief and indignation, as if one's parents had died. "Bastard, you dare steal this old master's shadowed heaven lotus." As soon as these words fell, a figure rushed over from not far away, glaring at Yang Kai angrily, stomping his feet on the ground and leaping into the air. 2 deep footprints were left on the ground. In mid-air, the man threw a punch towards Yang Kai. The punch was silent and seemed to be light and powerless, but Yang Kai's eyes narrowed and a dignified expression appeared on his face. Taking a deep breath, he let out a long roar, leapt into the air, and met the incoming punch with a punch. The 2 fists collided without any fancy moves, and a force pattern visible to the naked eye swept through the air like a ripple. The scene seemed to freeze for a moment. After a short while, a deafening sound rang out as a violent force erupted, directly distorting the surrounding space. Yang Kai was sent flying, and the cultivator of unknown origin was also unable to stabilize its body, somersaulting several times in the air before being sent flying back. Chapter 1705. Yang Kai landed lightly on a lotus leaf and raised his head to look ahead. Only now did he have the time to size up the newcomer. Unexpectedly, this person turned out to be an old man with a short stature. Even if he stood up straight, Yang Kai estimated that he was still a head shorter than himself. His complexion was dark like the bottom of a pot, comparable to old blackface Yang Pei of Treasure Trove Pavilion. Perhaps because his treasures had been taken away by Yang Kai, this old man's complexion had become even darker. The clothes he was wearing were simple and crude, made from the skin of an unknown sea beast. The clothes were in tatters and looked tattered. His bulging muscles were exposed, and they were filled with explosive power. It was very eye-catching. It could be said that apart from this old man's short stature, his body was well proportioned, which was the most direct manifestation of his physical strength. The old man obviously hadn't thought that Kai Yang would be able to take his fist head-on and not fall into a disadvantageous position. After landing on the ground, he frowned slightly. Immediately after, he rushed over at an even faster speed and roared, "Little brat, today either you die or this old man dies." Yang Kai had taken 2/3 of the shadowed heaven lotus, which was even more serious than taking his life, so how could he let Yang Kai off so easily? If possible, Yang Kai did not want to fight with such a muddle-headed person, but seeing this old man's demeanor and tone, he knew that this matter could not be settled peacefully. Moreover, he rarely encountered an opponent like this old man, so naturally he was a little excited. Not only did he not shrink back, but he also laughed and rushed forward. In mid-air, the two figures separated as soon as they came into contact, and only after a long time did a violent explosion resound. The second time they fought, the two were still evenly matched, neither gaining an advantage. Without any time to breathe, the two rushed towards each other again. The little dolphin was hiding in the lake on the island, looking up, its eyes filled with worry. Hong hong hong, bursting sounds kept coming from the island, and Yang Kai and the old man gradually shifted the battlefield to avoid affecting the ocean lotus in the lake. At this point, both of them had the same scruples, not wanting to destroy the precious alchemy materials. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the battlefield was shifted to the sea. Yang Kai no longer had any scruples, and his eyes lit up. He pushed his physical strength to the limit and tangled with the unknown old man, their fists and feet colliding. This barbaric way of fighting allowed him to experience a carefree feeling he had never experienced before. He laughed out loud and did not care about his injuries at all. He looked like he was going to fight the old man with his life. He had never shown any signs of failure. The old man's expression was stern as he was secretly shocked. He had been on Serene Soul Island for hundreds of years, and he had long known what kind of cultivation method he should choose to survive here. He had originally thought that his attainments in the physical body were extremely high, enough to occupy the top position in the territory. But he did not expect that a young man who suddenly appeared could actually fight with him to such an extent. This young man's physique was not inferior to his at all. The sound of bones breaking could be heard constantly, and blood splattered everywhere. The old man was surprised to find that this young man's blood was not red. Instead, it was golden in color. That golden blood contained a blood vitality and energy fluctuation that left him flabbergasted. It was as if this young man's blood was comparable to the most precious divine material in the world. "Boy, your good luck has come to an end." The old man's eyes flashed fiercely as he flicked his wrist, and a hammer-like artifact suddenly appeared in his palm. Taking advantage of the moment when Yang Kai blocked his punch, he swung his fist fiercely, swinging it fiercely towards Yang Kai's forehead. Although he could not use his Saint Chi and could not display the full power of this artifact, the old man's tremendous strength was enough to split the sky. If it really hit, Yang Kai's head would definitely explode. Yang Kai did not expect this old man to be so cunning. Seeing the hammer close in, Yang Kai's pupils shrank slightly, and he quickly tilted his head. At the same time, his body suddenly bloomed with a 5-colored light. This light flowed. Gradually, the yellow light took over and covered Yang Kai's body. 5 elements indestructible sword tempering art, Earth Sword Chi. The Earth Sword Chi Yang Kai cultivated was powered by divine nullification sand, a rare origin king-grade material that had extremely high defensive properties. Under the control of Yang Kai's divine sense, the Earth Sword Chi quickly condensed into a shield shape in front of the hammer. Hong Long. The yellow energy shield was blasted apart and the hammer smashed into Yang Kai's shoulder. Yang Kai's body sank slightly, but he quickly adjusted himself. Grinning fiercely, He rushed into the old man's defensive circle and slammed his hands upwards. The old man let out a strange cry and hurriedly retreated, but he was still unable to avoid this desperate counterattack. His chin was caught by Yang Kai's hands and his entire head jerked backwards. If it were not for his powerful physical body, this blow alone would have been enough to kill him. Even so, the old man still saw stars and almost fainted. He staggered back several dozen meters, but before he could regain his footing, he glanced over at Yang Kai in fear and quickly fled. Yang Kai frowned and stood in place, not pursuing. Only when the old man's figure disappeared from sight did he move his shoulder that had been hit by the hammer. With a series of cracking sounds, the dislocated bone was restored. This old man, Yang Kai muttered thoughtfully. From beginning to end, he had not had the time or effort to ask the old man about his origins or why he lived so far away from Serene Soul Island. The little dolphin's cry came from the island's lake. Yang Kai turned his head to look at it and found that the little dolphin was looking at him nervously, seemingly worried about whether he had been injured. Yang Kai cast a reassuring look at it before walking over. There was still a third of the sea lotuses left in the island's lake that had not been collected, so Yang Kai naturally did not intend to let them go. The old man had called these sea lotuses shady heaven lotuses, but Yang Kai was sure that he had never heard of such a thing before. Probably as he had guessed before, shady heaven lotuses were a special product of Serene Soul Island and only circulated within Serene Soul Island. No one could take them outside. After a while, Yang Kai had finished collecting all the shady heaven lotuses. He looked up and found that on a mountain a few miles away, the old man was standing there with a face full of grief and indignation, looking at him with helpless eyes. That feeling was as if the heart of the woman he had always cared for had been easily captured by another man. Yang Kai grinned at him. The old man's lungs were about to explode as he turned around and left. He had no way of defeating Yang Kai, so rather than humiliating himself, he would rather not see it. Yang Kai found a simple wooden house nearby, presumably built by the old man. Yang Kai moved in without hesitation. 3 days later, Yang Kai was studying the efficacy of the shady heaven lotuses and the body-tempering pill, hoping to improve them to a perfect level when light footsteps suddenly came from outside the wooden house. Yang Kai smiled and put down the matter at hand, waiting quietly. A moment later, the door of the wooden house was opened and the old man stood in the distance with a pale face, about 100 feet away from Yang Kai, looking at Yang Kai with a complicated look. After a long time, he asked in a deep voice, "You are not from Mingyu?" Yang Kai frowned and asked, "Who is Mingyu?" A look of surprise appeared on the old man's face as he looked at Yang Kai seriously, as if trying to see if he was lying. Yang Kai's eyes were clear as he looked back at the old man. The old man nodded secretly, his attitude softening a little, no longer carrying the hatred of killing his father and stealing his wife, slowly saying, "You don't know Mingyu? It seems you have just entered Serene Soul Island not long ago, right?" "Old sir is wise." Yang Kai praised casually, "You are right, I have only been here for about a month." "No wonder." The old man squeezed out a smile, but it was extremely ugly. "Since you are not from Mingyu, we can have a good talk." "I was thinking the same thing." Yang Kai smiled slightly. If not for this, he would not have stayed on this island. He did not know much about the situation on Serene Soul Island, nor was he able to explore the inside of Serene Soul Island. Now that he had finally met a living person here, and one who had obviously lived here for many years, he naturally had to make good use of him. "Can this old master come in and talk?" the old man asked somewhat gloomily. "Of course, this is old sir's residence." Yang Kai invited him in a carefree manner. The old man's mouth twitched, but he did not show much fear. Although he felt that he was not a match for Yang Kai, he was confident he could escape from Yang Kai if he really went all out. He believed that Yang Kai would not be stupid enough to fight him to the death. After the old man sat down in front of him, Yang Kai asked, "Old sir, who is this Mingyu you mentioned just now?" The old man snorted coldly, "A scoundrel." Yang Kai was stunned, thinking that this old man seemed to have quite a bit of enmity with Mingyu. Otherwise, the old man would not have gnashed his teeth at the mention of this name. "He is the current island master of Serene Soul Island," the old man added. "Mingyu is the island master?" Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. When he first came to Serene Soul Island, he had heard the thin man mention the island master. He did not expect to learn the island master's name from this old man. That's right. Yang Kai rolled his eyes and asked with a smile, Old Sir said that he is the current island master of Serene Soul Island. Could it be that there were other island masters before? The old man looked at Yang Kai in surprise, secretly admiring his sharp thinking, and then proudly said, the previous island master was this old master. Yang Kai was stunned for a moment, then cupped his fists and said, sorry for the disrespect. Humph, you're just a stray dog. The old man laughed at himself and said, now, this old master can only hide here and drag out an ignoble existence. What's there to be disrespectful about? What's more, this old master was defeated by you. It was just a fluke. Yang Kai said modestly. The old man did not linger on this issue and stared deeply at Yang Kai. Have you cultivated an extremely profound body-refining secret art? Chapter 1706. A few days ago, when he was fighting with Yang Kai had suddenly used the 5 elements indestructible sword tempering art. With his eyesight, he had naturally noticed some clues. On Serene Soul Island, Saint Chi could not be used at all, so the only explanation for the 5-colored light was that it was a body-tempering secret art. The power cultivated from a body-tempering secret art was not in the scope of Saint Chi, so it was not restricted by Serene Soul Island. Yes. Yang Kai did not conceal anything. The old man's face suddenly flashed a fiery look. Body-tempering secret arts were relatively rare throughout the entire star territory, and profound body-tempering secret arts were even rarer. However, just because they were rare did not make body-tempering secret arts precious. Firstly, it was more difficult to cultivate a body-refining cultivation method. Even if it was an ordinary body-refining cultivation method, it would be difficult to cultivate it to an extremely high level. Secondly, a cultivator would not have so much energy to cultivate a body-refining cultivation method in their lifetime. A cultivator's standard of strength and survival was Saint Chi and spiritual energy, so even if many people knew the benefits of having a strong physical body, there was no way to cultivate a body-tempering secret art. But on Serene Soul Island, things were different. In this damned place, Saint Chi could not be used and spiritual energy was suppressed. Cultivating a body-tempering secret art was the best and brightest path for a cultivator. Over the countless years, countless cultivator had wandered to Serene Soul Island, so naturally, some body-tempering secret arts had also poured into Serene Soul Island. The old man had also cultivated one, but it was an extremely ordinary secret art, completely different from Yang Kai's 5 elements indestructible sword tempering secret art. The reason why the 5 elements indestructible sword tempering secret art was so powerful was not because of the secret art itself, but because of the materials required to cultivate it. The old man knew that if he could obtain Yang Kai's body tempering secret art, his strength would definitely increase greatly. So when he heard that Yang Kai had a profound body tempering secret art, his eyes became fiery. As a master with great strength, he knew that secret arts could not be obtained casually, so the old man could only suppress the desire in his heart. Let me introduce myself. I am Shohu. When he said this, there was a sense of pride in his voice, as if Yang Kai should have heard of this name. Unfortunately, the result disappointed him. Yang Kai just lightly cupped his fists. So it's Mr. Shaw, I'm Yang Kai. Shohu frowned and asked tentatively, have you never heard of this old master's name? Yang Kai chuckled. Mr. Shaw, are you from the deep sea? Shohu nodded and asked, are you from the mainland? Not bad. Shohu understood. On Shadowed Star, deep sea and inland cultivators belonged to 2 different systems. Although they were not completely isolated from each other, it was rare for them to set foot in each other's territory. It was not strange that people from the inland did not know the names of the powerhouses in the deep sea. After learning this, Shohu's expression relaxed slightly and he chuckled, this old master has been here for more than 300 years. Back then, this old master was the 2nd temple master of Sea Temple. How is Sea Temple doing now? Old Sir is the 2nd temple master of Sea Temple. This time it was Yang Kai's turn to be stunned. I won't hide it from Old Sir, I came from the vicinity of Sea Temple's Sunrise Island. Sea Temple is now a very powerful force in the deep sea and can be considered the strongest among the human race, enough to compete with Sea God Palace. Shohu listened quietly. Feeling relieved, Shohu said, "That group of brats seems to have some skill. Boy, do you have some kind of friendship with Sea Temple? How did you end up at Sunrise Island?" "I just happened to pass by, but we don't have any friendship," Yang Kai chuckled. Perhaps because he had inquired about his relationship with Sea Temple, Shohu's expression relaxed a lot. Seeing that Yang Kai was not as aggressive as most young people, he was naturally very satisfied with him. Both of them put aside the awkwardness of their previous battle and began chatting. Yang Kai wanted to know about the situation on Serene Soul Island. Shohu, on the other hand, wanted to inquire about the current situation of Sea Temple, so with one asking and the other answering, the atmosphere quickly became harmonious. After a long time, both of them obtained the information they wanted. Yang Kai frowned. This Serene Soul Island was a strange place, an independent, enclosed space. No one could find a way out. Even Shohu, as the island master of Serene Soul Island, could not leave this place. Mingyu, on the other hand, was originally a vice island master under Shohu and was not much weaker than him. But one day, Mingyu's strength suddenly soared and he competed with Shohu for power. As a result, Shohu was naturally defeated and had no choice but to flee Serene Soul Island and hide on this small island. Calculating the time, it was nearly 100 years ago. For 100 years, Shohu had endured humiliation, hoping that one day he could return to Serene Soul Island and take revenge. Unfortunately, his strength seemed to have reached a certain bottleneck and he could no longer continue to improve, so he could only stay here. Fortunately, this place was very far from Serene Soul Island and most people would not be able to reach it. When Shohu fled here in the past, he had only narrowly escaped death. Yang Kai was the only intelligent life form he had seen in the past 100 years. As for how big this independent space on Serene Soul Island was, even Shohu could not say. He had once left this island to explore, but the deeper he went, the more powerful the sea beasts he encountered became, to the point where even he was no match for them, so he had no choice but to retreat. Is there really no way to leave Serene Soul Island? Yang Kai frowned. Perhaps there is, but this old master cannot find it. Shohu shook his head. At the very least, it cannot be found here. What senior means is, Shohu frowned and pondered for a moment before saying, this is just this old master's guess. Whether it is correct or not, this old master is not sure. Senior, please speak. If there is a way out here, Serene Soul Island is the only clue. There is a very strange place there that this old master wanted to investigate but was unable to enter, Shohu said unhurriedly. Yang Kai's expression changed slightly. Shohu smiled. If the two of us join forces, we may be able to seize Serene Soul Island, but this is just a possibility. Mingyu was stronger than I was back then, and now that 100 years have passed, I do not know how strong he has become. Perhaps we will just be walking right into his trap. Yang Kai did not comment. He did not care how strong Mingyu was. In his battle with Shohu, he had not used his full strength. What's more, he still had the stone mongoose Xiao Xiao as his trump card. In terms of pure strength, who in the world could be stronger than Xiao Xiao? As long as Xiao Xiao took action, no one on Serene Soul Island could be its opponent. Yang Kai was considering the authenticity of Shohu's words. Although this old man had a good temper, Yang Kai did not know what he was trying to achieve with his help. If Yang Kai were to fall into his trap, the gains would not make up for the losses. Yang Kai would rather measure the heart of a gentleman with his own narrow-mindedness than regret it later. Seeing Yang Kai remain silent, Shohu promptly changed the topic. Were you studying Shadowed Heaven Lotuses and Shadowed Heaven Pills just now? Yang Kai recovered from his contemplation. Nodding, he said, these things are a specialty of Serene Soul Island, right? Indeed. Shadowed Heaven Lotuses cannot be found in the outside world and can only be produced on Serene Soul Island. The cultivator who has fallen here uses Shadowed Heaven Pills to enhance their strength. Unfortunately, this old master does not know alchemy, so Shadowed Heaven Lotuses cannot provide him with any help. Otherwise, do you think this old master would have left so many Shadowed Heaven Lotuses in the lake? Speaking of this, Shaw, who had a pained expression on his face. 1,000 shadowed heaven lotuses. On Serene Soul Island, there were thousands of cultivator, and even after several years of searching, they might not be able to find so many. But now, they had all entered Yang Kai's space ring. Yang Kai suddenly asked, "Does Old Man Shaw have a shadowed heaven pill recipe?" "Of course." Shaw, who chuckled, proudly saying, "This old master was once the island master of Serene Soul Island, something like a pill recipe." As he spoke, Shaw, whose eyes lit up as he pointed to Yang Kai and asked in a trembling voice, "Are you an alchemist?" If Yang Kai was not an alchemist, there would be no need for him to ask about a pill recipe. Shaw, who stared at Yang Kai with a scorching look in his eyes. It was as if he had seen an amazing treasure. Yang Kai chuckled, "Kind of. Are you really an alchemist?" Shaw, who stood up directly. Yang Kai nodded again. Shaw, who froze for a moment before laughing, "The heavens have not forsaken me. The heavens have not forsaken me." Good, good, good. The reason why his strength had stagnated over the years was because he had no shadowed heaven pills. Directly taking shadowed heaven lotus had no effect on him at all. Only by refining shadowed heaven lotus into a pill could it display its proper effects. Therefore, when he learned that Yang Kai was really an alchemist, Shaw, who was so excited that he lost his composure. But soon, Shaw, who frowned. Glancing at Yang Kai, he let out a deep sigh. "What's wrong?" Yang Kai was puzzled. A moment ago, Shaw, who had been as happy as a child, but now he had become so desperate. The contrast was simply too great. Even if you are an alchemist, without earth fire, you can't perform alchemy. Shaw, whose face turned ashen as he sat down again, Serene Soul Island's alchemists are extremely rare. Out of tens of thousands of people, I'm afraid there are only 4 or 5 alchemists. These alchemists have varying levels of skill, but if they want to perform alchemy, they must rely on Serene Soul Island's earth fire. We don't have any here. I don't need earth fire. Yang Kai chuckled. Nonsense. Shaw, who sneered, which alchemist doesn't need earth fire to perform alchemy? Perhaps it is possible outside, but here, Saint Chi cannot be used, so one can only rely on earth fire. As Shaw, who spoke, he was left speechless. Because he clearly felt a burning power spread from Yang Kai's body. This was not Saint Chi, but spiritual energy. Conflagrated knowledge. See? Shaw, whose face changed drastically. Yang Kai smiled innocently. Even in the outside world, he did not need to use Saint Chi to perform alchemy because he had always used his conflagrated knowledge. See? What's more, he had the Firebird. Since fusing with Brilliant Flame Sect's Heavenly Thunderfire, the Firebird had evolved into a complete sentience and could assume human form. She had also fused with Yang Kai's natal artifact, the Alchemy Furnace. She herself was the best earth fire. At the very least, Yang Kai could enter the Sealed World Bead to perform alchemy. The Sealed World Bead was also a self-contained world where Saint Chi was not restricted. With these various advantages, Yang Kai did not need to worry about alchemy at all. However, there was no need to expose these to Shaw, who. Chapter 1707. After learning that Yang Kai was not only an alchemist but also possessed a conflagrated knowledge. So he did not need to rely on Saint Chi or earth fire to perform alchemy, Shaw, who was ecstatic. This meant that as long as he maintained a good relationship with Yang Kai, he would not have to worry about not having enough shadowed heaven pills in the future to increase his strength. After 100 years of waiting, he finally saw the hope of revenge. He handed over the shadowed heaven pill recipe without reservation and let Yang Kai study it himself. When you've finished studying the pill recipe and set out to refine the shadowed heaven pill, this old master has something to ask of you. Shaw, who said with a smile, deliberately trying to get closer to Yang Kai, the wrinkles on his face furrowing into a ball, making him look extremely amiable. Yang Kai naturally did not act politely, allowing Shaw to do as he pleased before diving into the research of the shadowed heaven pill recipe. Yang Kai had some shadowed heaven pills on hand, so he could infer the approximate configuration of the pill recipe from them. Now that he had a complete pill recipe, this process became much simpler and easier. What's more, Yang Kai's alchemy level was one of the top in the star territory, so with his eyesight and experience, not only could he understand the shadowed heaven pill recipe, but he could also make improvements to it. This was only natural. After all, the shadowed heaven pill was developed by the alchemist who had wandered to Serene Soul Island, and the level of the alchemist who had wandered here was not too high, so how valuable could the pill recipe they developed be? At most, it could be said to have provided Yang Kai with some reference. From beginning to end, it only took Yang Kai 5 days to design another shadowed heaven pill recipe. Compared to the one given by Shaw Hu, this one was undoubtedly many times better and required a lot of replacement materials. This also reduced some of the conflicting medicinal properties. Now that the pill recipe was complete, Yang Kai naturally began to perform alchemy. However, he was still missing one herb. The medicinal efficacies of the shadowed heaven lotus were very overbearing. If taken directly, it might be able to improve a cultivator's physique in a short time, making their physique much stronger. However, if there were no other herbs to neutralize the medicinal efficacies, they would only be able to take it for a short period of time. Forcibly taking it would not only not help the cultivator, but would also damage the cultivator's body. Yang Kai called Shaw Hu over. For the past few days, Shaw Hu had been standing guard outside the wooden house, not leaving even a single step, meditating as he made his own plans. Hearing Yang Kai's call, he couldn't wait to rush into the wooden house, looking at Yang Kai with eager eyes. "Old Shaw, I still need some Houtuinia cordata." Shaw Hu chuckled and waved his hand, causing a large pile of fish smell grass to appear in the wooden house. The air in the room immediately became turbid. This purple seaweed, which was only 3 inches long, was not a specialty of Serene Soul Island. It could be collected in almost any deep-sea territory, and its value was not too great. Forces like Sea Temple and Sea God's Palace disdained to collect it and simply allowed it to grow in the sea. However, its medicinal effect could perfectly fuse with the shadowed heaven lotus. The two conflicted and neutralized the overbearing characteristics of the shadowed heaven lotus, making it easier for the cultivator to absorb the shadowed heaven pill. Seeing the countless fish smell grass in front of him, Yang Kai froze for a moment before turning a meaningful look towards Shaw Hu and saying, "Old Shaw seems to have come prepared." Shaw Hu rubbed his hands and said, "Yang Kai, help this old master refine some shadowed heaven pills. As long as I have shadowed heaven pills, this old master can improve his strength again. At that time, we will have a chance to return to Serene Soul Island and find a way out." Yang Kai smiled lightly. Although he knew that Shaw Hu was trying to tempt him, he didn't care and simply said, "I have no problem refining for you, but do you have any shadowed heaven lotus?" The thousands of shadowed heaven lotuses in the lake on the island had already entered Yang Kai's space ring, so he would not take them out for Shaw Hu to refine. "You underestimate this old master too much." Shaw Hu smiled like a sly old fox. With a flip of his hand, Shaw Hu took out 17 to 18 shadowed heaven lotuses, all of them silver grade. Yang Kai was stunned. Shaw Hu grinned. How could this old master not know the principle of not putting all his eggs in one basket? "I haven't been staying on this island all this time for the past 100 years. I've gone out to explore from time to time, so there should be some gains. Not only that, I've also collected a lot of supplementary herbs for refining shadowed heaven pills. See if there's anything you need." Saying so, Shaw Hu took out a lot of other herbs. Yang Kai nodded and did not refuse, leaving behind the useful herbs and taking back the useless ones, hesitating for a moment before saying, "I have no problem refining for you, but I can't do this for free." 50-50. Shaw Hu did not wait for Yang Kai to finish and directly stated his price. "Tell this old master what supplementary herbs you need and this old master will go out and help you find them. This old master will only take half of the shadowed heaven pills refined." "Deal." Yang Kai no longer hesitated and nodded happily. With Shaw Hu being so forthright, it would only make him look petty if he continued to refuse. After getting along with this old man for a while, Yang Kai found that apart from some disagreements at the beginning, they got along quite well. Seeing Yang Kai agree, Shaw Hu smiled even more happily. On the same day, Shaw Hu left the island and went to the territory to look for all kinds of supplementary herbs. Although Yang Kai also had some alchemy materials on hand, they were not enough to support a large number of shadowed heaven pills, so he had Shaw Hu look for them as a precaution. After Shaw Hu left the island, Yang Kai waved his hand. A red flame shot out from the palm of his hand and twisted in midair. The next moment, a beautiful woman with a fiery figure and an indifferent expression appeared in front of Yang Kai, her red hair fluttering in the wind. She wore fiery red armor that only covered her full breasts and the sensitive parts from her thighs to her lower abdomen. She had an attractive collarbone, a flat abdomen, and a delicate navel that was exposed to the air. Her two beautiful legs, from the middle of her thighs, were as white as snow, and her delicate jade feet were spotlessly clean. Amidst the raging flames, she exuded a strange sense of beauty. Artifact Spirit Liu Yang. Today, she could no longer be called a firebird. She had her own sentience and could assume human form. She had been given a name by Yang Kai and could be regarded as a special creature. "What orders does Master have?" Liu Yang asked in a deep voice as soon as she appeared. "I want to borrow your strength to perform alchemy. Cooperate with me," Yang Kai said lightly. Liu Yang nodded without saying a word before transforming into an alchemy furnace. The shape of this alchemy furnace was identical to her natal artifact, but it was completely composed of flames, making it far more outstanding than the Origin King-grade alchemy furnace. Yang Kai concentrated on this, held his breath, and threw in the materials he had prepared one by one, communicating with Liu Yang with his divine sense to control the heat. The process of refining the Shadowed Heaven pill was not complicated, so with Yang Kai's methods, it was naturally easy for him to succeed. Half a day later, a pill fragrance filled the air from the wooden house. Yang Kai seized this opportunity and poured his divine sense into the alchemy furnace, using the method recorded in the True Alchemy Enlightenment scripture to condense the pill. A short while later, 3 flames shot up from the alchemy furnace into the sky. Yang Kai stretched out his hand and drew the 3 streams of light over to him, falling into a jade bottle he had prepared beforehand. A gurgling sound came from the jade bottle as Yang Kai fixed his eyes on it and smiled with satisfaction. The pill condensing technique recorded in the True Alchemy Enlightenment scripture was extensive and profound. If used properly, one could condense multiple pills at a time, unlike before when one could only refine 1 pill per set of materials. Over the years, Yang Kai had often tried to use this pill condensing technique to condense pills. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed, but he still gained some insights. Now that he had condensed 3 pills at a time, it was not a small breakthrough. Taking out a Shadowed Heaven pill, Yang Kai put it in his mouth and tasted it, feeling the medicinal efficacies contained within. After a while, he nodded with satisfaction and continued to devote himself to his alchemy. Half a day later, another furnace of Shadowed Heaven pills was successfully refined, and this time, Yang Kai condensed 4 Shadowed Heaven pills, an even better result than the first time. As time passed and the number of times he refined increased, Yang Kai's technique became more and more proficient, and the time it took to refine a furnace of Shadowed Heaven pills also became shorter and shorter, going from half a day to 2 hours, and then to 2 hours. The speed at which he refined these pills was incredible. In the process of constantly performing alchemy, Yang Kai's pill condensing technique also improved. It could be said that this rare alchemy experience allowed Yang Kai to make another substantial breakthrough on the alchemic Tao, which was an unexpected surprise. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from behind and Yang Kai turned his head to look, only to find that the little dolphin had arrived at the wooden house at some unknown time. It swung its tail and swam through the air as if it was swimming in the sea, without the slightest hindrance, its posture graceful. Yang Kai couldn't help gawking when he saw this. It was impossible to use Saint Chi on Serene Soul Island. Even with his strength, Yang Kai couldn't fly on Serene Soul Island and could only rely on his powerful physique to perform long-distance jumps. However, the little dolphin had obviously broken this common sense and was actually able to swim through the air, even if it couldn't fly very high. The little thing was obviously attracted by the pill fragrance, and when it came to Yang Kai's side, its nose twitched slightly as it stared eagerly at the alchemy furnace in front of it. Yang Kai saw crystal-clear saliva dripping from the corner of its mouth, making a crisp sound as it dripped onto the ground. Yang Kai was immediately disgusted by this little thing and didn't even have the mood to ask why it could swim through the air. The little dolphin let out an irresistible sound as it kept rubbing its head against Yang Kai's body, not caring if it was interfering with his alchemy. Yang Kai rubbed his temples and could only hand over a jade bottle filled with Shadowed Heaven pills to the little dolphin. The little dolphin excitedly took this bottle, circled around Yang Kai a few times, let out an excited cry, and left with the jade bottle in its mouth. Yang Kai continued to perform alchemy. 3 days later, Shohu returned to the island and brought a large number of supplementary herbs to Yang Kai before waiting quietly outside the wooden house. Smelling the pill fragrance wafting from the wooden house, Shohu felt as if he had become hundreds of years younger. Chapter 1708. So many. Are they all for me? Shohu's eyes widened as he stared at the jade bottles placed in front of him and asked in surprise. Yang Kai smiled and nodded. Didn't we agree to split them 50-50? This is the 50-50 number. Shohu was stunned, his face filled with disbelief. He had provided Yang Kai with a total of over 100 silver lotuses over the past few days, which was almost all he had in stock. He had thought that obtaining 200 shadowed heaven pills would be quite good, but now the jade bottles in front of him told him that the reality was much better than he had expected. There were at least 60 to 70 jade bottles here, each filled with 10 pills, which meant that Yang Kai had given him 600 to 700 shadowed heaven pills. How did he refine so many shadowed heaven pills? As the former island master of Serene Soul Island, Shohu had seen many poor alchemists refine shadowed heaven pills, but in the hands of those alchemists, it was already considered good if they could refine 2 or 3 pills, so how could they produce as many as Yang Kai could? This only showed that Yang Kai's alchemy level was countless times better than those poor alchemists. Young boy, you are a friend, this old master will accept. Shohu restrained his expression and looked at Yang Kai seriously. If one day we can escape from this place, this old master promises that the door of Sea Temple will always be open to you. Yang Kai's honesty and trustworthiness moved Shohu. Shohu had personally witnessed Yang Kai's strength and knew that such a person was worth making friends with, so his words were sincere. Yang Kai chuckled and said, since old man Sho has said so, it would be impolite for this little one to refuse. Being able to win over such an ally on Serene Soul Island was naturally something Yang Kai hoped to see. It was better than wandering here alone. Moreover, Shohu was the former island master of Serene Soul Island, so he knew a lot about Serene Soul Island. Advancing and retreating together with him would be beneficial in the future. Shohu laughed. Unfortunately, there is no wine here. Otherwise, drinking with you would have been a great joy in life. Forget it, this old master will first see if these shadowed heaven pills are useful to this old master. He had not taken shadowed heaven pills for nearly 100 years, causing his strength to stagnate. Now that he had obtained so many shadowed heaven pills, he could not wait to test them. Taking out a jade bottle, Shohu took out a pill from it and stuffed it in front of Yang Kai's face. The next moment, Shohu's body shook as a look of disbelief filled his face, calling out in shock, an origin grade pill? Yang Kai, you are actually an origin grade alchemist. This time, who's of course. Before, when Yang Kai said he was an alchemist and could refine shadowed heaven pills, Shohu had not paid much attention to it. He had only thought that Yang Kai had some attainments in alchemy, but as soon as this shadowed heaven pill entered his mouth, Shohu realized something was wrong. The shadowed heaven pill Yang Kai had refined was completely different from the ones he had taken before. The biggest difference was the grade of this pill. Shohu could instantly tell that this shadowed heaven pill was an origin grade pill, and at least an origin grade mid-rank one at that. It might even be high rank. This meant that Yang Kai was definitely an origin grade alchemist. Shohu did not dare to imagine that Yang Kai was an origin king grade alchemist because that was just a legend. The spirit pill melted as soon as it entered his mouth, turning into a warm current that flowed into his lower abdomen and then into his limbs with the dantian as its center. Shohu's old face instantly flushed red. He no longer had the time to talk to Yang Kai and quickly focused on absorbing the medicinal efficacies of the spirit pill. Yang Kai smiled slightly and did not disturb him again. Instead, he left the wooden house, found a quiet place on the island, and began to take the shadowed heaven pill. The shadowed heaven pill he refined was completely different from the ones he had obtained from the 2 dead people before. The shadowed heaven pill he had obtained before was not completely refined, so its medicinal efficacies were not fully displayed. However, on Serene Soul Island, this kind of situation was simply unavoidable. The level of alchemists, the inability to use their Saint Chi, the quality of the earth fire, and various other factors all forced the alchemists of Serene Soul Island to refine shadowed heaven pills and waste a large number of shadowed heaven lotuses. Yang Kai had made up for all these shortcomings, so it would be strange if the spirit pill he refined was not good. After a few days of experimentation, Yang Kai came to a conclusion. The shadowed heaven pills refined with silver lotuses were origin grade, those refined with blue lotuses were Saint King grade, and those refined with pink shadowed heaven lotuses were Saint grade. Each grade of shadowed heaven pill had vastly different effects. Yang Kai did not use golden lotuses to refine because there were too few of them, only about 10 of them. However, Yang Kai felt that if he used golden lotuses, he should be able to refine origin king grade shadowed heaven pills. The medicinal efficacies shuttled through his meridians and physique, transforming his body, meridians, and cells, causing Yang Kai's physique to become stronger and stronger. This was the first time Yang Kai had taken a shadowed heaven pill, so the benefits he obtained were simply unimaginable. On top of that, because he had taken a lot of life revitalizing jade cream before, his physique was already close to perfection, so he was able to absorb the medicinal efficacies of shadowed heaven pills much faster. In less than half an hour, the medicinal efficacies of an origin grade shadowed heaven pill were completely absorbed by Yang Kai. Without delay, Yang Kai took out another pill, tossed it into his mouth, and continued to absorb its medicinal efficacies. Unable to cultivate Saint Chi or spiritual energy, taking shadowed heaven pills to cultivate one's physique was the only way out for a cultivator on Serene Soul Island. 3 days later, a burst of laughter suddenly came from the direction of the wooden house. The little dolphin swimming in the lake on the island raised its head and glanced over before casually retracting its head under its lotus leaf and no longer paying attention. A figure shot up into the sky from the direction of the wooden house and quickly rushed towards Yang Kai. A short time later, Shaw, who stood in front of Yang Kai, his eyes shining brightly and his aura seemingly having become stronger. Yang Kai opened his eyes, glanced over at Shaw Hu, and smiled. Old man Shaw seems to have made a breakthrough. Shaw Hu looked at Yang Kai gratefully and nodded. Good, after 100 years of seclusion, this old master has finally reached a new height, and this old master feels that there is still room for improvement, young boy. This old master will remember this kindness. Old man Shaw is too polite. Yang Kai smiled lightly. Yang Kai, how about you take a punch from this old master? Shaw Hu asked with a smile. In this damned place, he had no target to practice with, so he could only turn his attention to Yang Kai. Good, to his surprise, Yang Kai agreed. Shaw Hu did not hesitate, letting out a roar as he stomped his feet on the ground and shot out like an arrow from a bow, throwing out a punch mid-air. Yang Kai sat cross-legged in place, motionless, simply looking at Shaw Hu with a smile, seemingly not putting this earth-shattering blow in his eyes. Shaw Hu was stunned. He shouted angrily, "Young boy, you don't take this old master seriously, do you? Old man Shaw, feel free to use your full strength." Yang Kai responded indifferently. Shaw Hu's old face was somewhat embarrassed. Although he was very grateful to Yang Kai, being looked down upon like this made him feel very uncomfortable. Hearing Yang Kai say so, steeling his heart, Shaw Hu really did use his full strength. The sound of air exploding rang out as Shaw Hu's fist flew through the air like a falling star, carrying with it the power to destroy heaven and earth. If this punch struck, even a 1,000-meter-tall mountain would be smashed to pieces. Yang Kai simply stretched out his palm and blocked it. His expression was calm and indifferent. The next moment, the fist and palm collided. Yang Kai's body only shook slightly, but he still sat in place, not moving. Shaw Hu, on the other hand, was forced back 3 steps by a huge rebound force, a slight blush appearing on his face that quickly disappeared. Shaw Hu's expression fluctuated. His previous anger disappeared and was replaced by a look of horror as he stared at Yang Kai, unable to speak for a long time. When he fought with Yang Kai a few days ago, although he was at a slight disadvantage, he had not been completely suppressed like he was now. But today, even with the increase in his strength, he was unable to shake Yang Kai's body even if he used all his strength. This could only mean one thing: while his strength was growing, Yang Kai's strength was also growing, much faster than his. Otherwise, Such a situation would never have occurred. How many shadowed heaven pills did you take? Shahu hesitated for a long time before asking this critical question. 100 or so. Yang Kai thought for a while and said. Shahu sucked in a breath of cold air, the corners of his eyes twitching as he asked in amazement, "Can your body bear it?" Over the past 3 days, he had only taken about 10 shadowed heaven pills. The shadowed heaven pills refined by Yang Kai were not comparable to those produced on Serene Soul Island. These were genuine origin grade pills, and if one took too many in a short time, no matter how strong one's physique was, they would not be able to withstand the medicinal efficacies and would only cause damage to one's physique and meridians. In the worst-case scenario, one's body would explode and die. Taking 10 shadowed heaven pills in 3 days was already Shahu's limit, but Yang Kai had actually taken 10 times as many. "Why can't I bear it?" Yang Kai asked curiously. He had yet to mention that many of the shadowed heaven pills he had taken had formed pill veins. A single shadowed heaven pill was equivalent to the medicinal efficacies of 2 pills. Shahu stood dumbfounded on the spot and shook his head repeatedly, muttering in a desolate tone, "Monster, monster." He was certain that he was no longer Yang Kai's opponent now. If he still had the confidence to escape from Yang Kai a few days ago, now he no longer had such confidence. It was conceivable that as time passed, the gap in strength between him and Yang Kai would only grow larger and larger. It's really good to have a good body-tempering secret art. Shahu secretly sighed to himself. What he did not know was that the reason Yang Kai was able to absorb the medicinal efficacies of 100 shadowed heaven pills in such a short time was not only because of his body-tempering secret art, but also because of the solid foundation he had built with the life-revitalizing jade cream. This was a condition Shahu did not possess. An origin-grade alchemist was a monstrous existence who had shown him kindness. Shahu would be a fool not to make friends with such a person. Shahu secretly made up his mind that whether or not he could escape from Serene Soul Island in the future, Yang Kai would be his most loyal ally. Chapter 1709. About 3,000 kilometers away from Serene Soul Island, on a sea territory, a several-meter-long ship was sailing slowly, shuttling back and forth in search of precious shadowed heaven lotuses. There weren't many cultivator on the ship, only about 20 or so, and a few of them were standing on the deck, their eyes wandering back and forth across the sea. Most of them wore resentful looks as they sat in place with gloomy eyes. These people exchanged glances from time to time, all of them showing looks of unwillingness and humiliation. Pang Zhen of Sunrise Island and Qian Mo of the Sea Clan were among them. Both of them were third-order origin returning realm cultivators and could be considered top-level masters on Shadowed Star, but after arriving on Serene Soul Island, they found that everyone here was stronger than them. Of course, this was only in terms of physical strength, but on Serene Soul Island, the only indicator of strength was the strength of one's physique. Pang Zhen and Qian Mo's third-order origin returning realm cultivations were completely useless here. They had been stranded on Serene Soul Island for quite some time now, so it was more than enough for Pang Zhen and Qian Mo to figure out the situation here. An ugly man with a sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks suddenly walked in front of Qian Mo. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and touched his chin with one hand. He used a scrutinizing gaze to scan Qian Mo's beautiful and alluring body. His eyes flickered with an obscene light as he let out a low and lewd laugh. Qian Mo raised her head and glanced at him, her pretty face immediately sinking. "Lady Qian Mo, you should consider this carefully. If you submit to this master will guarantee you a safe and sound life in the future. Not only will you be able to officially join Serene Soul Island, you won't have to do any dangerous work, but you will also have a chance to obtain some shadowed heaven pills. This is a very good deal. If you miss this village, you won't get another chance. You should know that others won't be as easy to deal with as me," the sharp-mouthed man said in a seductive tone. The man's eyes became even more unscrupulous as they stared at Qian Mo's full breasts, secretly swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Serene Soul Island was a damned place, so it was very difficult for anyone to enter it by mistake. There were only a few thousand people on Serene Soul Island in total. There were even fewer women, especially beautiful women. Any beauty was an extremely precious existence. They could even be treated as rare goods that could be exchanged for large amounts of shadowed heaven pills. Qianmo was undoubtedly such a person. The sharp-mouthed man had his eyes on Qianmo. Taking advantage of his position, he tried to force Qianmo to submit to him. Once he achieved his goal, he would not care about his own pleasure. Either way, it would be a good deal to exchange it for shadowed heaven pills. However, what made him angry was that no matter what he said, Qianmo ignored him. In any case, he was still one of the commanders of the Sea God Palace. Qianmo did not put the pointy-mouthed man in her eyes. She could kill dozens of people like him with one hand if they were outside. Therefore, when faced with the man's persuasion, Qianmo only replied with one word, "Scram. You." The sharp-mouthed man was furious. He pointed his finger at Qianmo and pretended to slap her. It was as if he wanted to vent his anger by slapping her. Hualala, almost half of the people on the ship stood up. They all looked at the sharp-mouthed man with cold eyes. Everyone's eyes were filled with hatred. These people were all the cultivators of the Sea God Palace and the Sea God Palace who had fallen on Serene Soul Island last time. Now, they had obviously abandoned their former enmity and were on the same side. Therefore, when they saw Qianmo, they were about to be punished. They all stood up at once. It was as if they were waiting for the sharp-mouthed man to make a move so that they could rush up and tear him to pieces. In the end, the sharp-mouthed man did not slap her. Although he did not fear the Sea God Palace and the Sea God Palace, if they really fought, the winner would be his side. However, the island master of the Dark Moon Island had clearly ordered that the residents of Serene Soul Island were not to kill each other. Anyone who violated this order would be sentenced to death. This was not because the island master of the Dark Moon Island loved his people, nor was it because he was generous and merciful. It was because there were too few people on Serene Soul Island. There weren't many people on the island to begin with. If they were to kill each other over some trivial matters, then as the island master, he wouldn't have any subordinates to command. He would really become an island master with no subordinates, and it wouldn't be fun to be the island master. On Serene Soul Island, only the island master himself and a few of his trusted subordinates could kill. The others, no matter what position they held, were not qualified to decide the life or death of another person. When Pang Zhan, Qianmo, and the others had just fallen on Serene Soul Island, they were not considered residents of Serene Soul Island, so naturally they were not included in this list. Therefore, the thin leader could take advantage of this opportunity to kill a few people. On one hand, it was a deterrent, and on the other hand, it was also for fun. Now, the situation was different. Although most of the cultivators of the Sea God Palace and the Sea God Palace had not officially joined Serene Soul Island, they had a register. The sharp-mouthed man did not dare to offend the island master. Good, good, good. The sharp-mouthed man sneered, "You have guts to offend me. I will make you regret it for the rest of your lives. Little girl, you look down on me, right? One day, I will make you beg me to accept you. I hope you can still maintain this unwillingness to be violated when that time comes." Hey. At this moment, a Serene Soul Island cultivator on the ship suddenly shouted, "Master, a beaver beast has been spotted 3 miles away. It's rushing towards us." "Is that so?" The sharp-mouthed man's eyes lit up. He turned his head and looked in that direction. Sure enough, he saw a ferocious-looking sea beast that was more than 10 meters long. It was approaching them while raising monstrous waves. A smug smile appeared at the corners of his mouth as he glanced over at the cultivators who had opposed him before and said leisurely, "When collecting and searching for shadowed heaven lotuses, the greatest danger comes from these different kinds of sea beasts. Ian, all of you have only just arrived on Shadowed Soul Island, so it is time for you to gain some experience. Except for Qianmo, everyone else will face these enemies. I hope you won't disappoint me." As soon as he said this, the expressions of the more than 10 cultivators of the Sea God Palace and Sea God Palace all changed. Outside, none of them would put this beaver beast in their eyes. They could kill it with a wave of their hand, but on Serene Soul Island, they might not be a match for the beaver even if they worked together. This was the first time they had gone out to sea, and the first time they had participated in the search for shadowed heaven lotuses. Without taking shadowed heaven pills to temper their bodies, they were no match for the beaver beast. The sharp-mouthed man was obviously retaliating, and he was doing it openly, so he would not violate the island master's orders. What? Are you all deaf? Don't you listen to my words? The sharp-mouthed man looked at Pang Zhan and the others triumphantly, infinite pleasure surging in his heart. As he spoke, his expression suddenly became fierce as he shouted, "Throw them all into the sea." Without experiencing a few battles with these sea beasts, they won't know how precious shadowed heaven lotuses are. The sharp-mouthed man's subordinates responded loudly, each of them grinning from ear to ear as they grabbed at different targets. Pang Zhan and the others struggled to resist, but how could they be a match for the sharp-mouthed man? Although these Serene Soul Island residents were not as strong as Pang Zhan and the others in terms of cultivation, they had more or less taken some shadowed heaven pills to temper their bodies, so their physiques were generally strong. In just a few moments, Pang Zhan and the others were beaten black and blue and fell into the sea one after another. The beaver beast that was rushing over obviously became much more excited and its speed suddenly increased as its target was Pang Zhan and the others who had fallen into the sea, wanting to eat them as food. Cheap slave. The sharp-mouthed man stood on the boat, admiring the struggling posture of Pang Zhan and the others, glancing sideways at Qian Mo and sneering, "If they die, it will be your responsibility. Heh. If you had submitted to me earlier, this wouldn't have happened. But, it's not too late now. As long as you kneel down and beg me to accept you, I can save them. A mere beaver beast won't be able to stop this master." Qian Mo's expression was one of grief and indignation as she gritted her teeth and glared fiercely at the sharp-mouthed man. Pang Zhan and her didn't have much of a friendship, and although the cultivator of Sea God Palace and Sea God Palace had put aside their differences and joined hands to fight for Pang Zhan's life, Qian Mo wasn't that noble. However, among the people who had fallen into the sea, there were also people from Sea God Palace and her family, so she couldn't just sit back and watch. Despicable. Qian Mo angrily rebuked. The sharp-mouthed man wasn't ashamed and laughed loudly, "So what if this master is despicable? Do you think this is still Sea God Palace? Do you think you're still the commander of Sea God Palace? TSK. Back when I was outside, I was in awe of your Sea God's Palace. When I saw people from your Sea God's Palace, I had to make a detour for fear of provoking you. I never thought that I would have a day like this. A dignified commander of the Sea God's Palace would have to kneel and beg me." Qian Mo's tender body trembled as her nails dug into her palms. Red blood flowed down her white wrists and dripped onto the deck, but she didn't notice it at all. "You don't have much time to think. If you hesitate any longer, they will all die." The sharp-mouthed man pointed forward. Qian Mo turned her head to look and was surprised to find that the huge sea beast was less than 500 feet away from Pang Zhan and the others. Although the people who fell into the water fled in all directions, how could they escape the beaver's speed? If the sharp-mouthed man didn't stop it, they would only end up being swallowed by the beaver one by one. A look of despair appeared on Qian Mo's face. "Kneel down," the sharp-mouthed man shouted and put pressure on Qian Mo again. He could also see that Qian Mo was a little shaken, so putting pressure on her at this time was undoubtedly the best choice. Perhaps Qian Mo would be crushed. The other residents of Serene Soul Island stood aside and watched the show with envy. The commander of Sea God Palace was such a noble status. In the past, they could only look up to her, but now they were being wantonly humiliated. This gave them a perverted pleasure. Especially when it came to such a beautiful woman with such a hot body. When they thought of her kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy, the group of people felt that it was worth it even if they died immediately. Qian Mo's body swayed and her knees seemed to bend, but she quickly straightened up and gritted her teeth. "In your dreams." The smile on the sharp-mouthed man's face stiffened as his expectation turned into disappointment and then into anger. Chapter 17:10. Qian Mo didn't care at all and just smiled coldly. "With my status, cultivation, and beauty, do you think Mingyu will accept me if I recommend myself to him? When the time comes, I can use the shadowed heaven pill to refine my body and you will have to listen to my orders. Can you guess how I will torture you then?" The pointer-mouthed man's face instantly turned pale and he was sweating profusely. If he could imagine such a scene, he could also imagine his own ending. It would be no better than death. Qian Mo was sent out to collect shadowed heaven lotuses because she didn't want to submit to Serene Soul Island's control. However, she was right. With her status and beauty, once she was willing to recommend herself to him, no man could refuse. Not even Ming Yu, the island master, could. When the time came, Qian Mo would jump up and become the island master's wife. This was something the pointy-mouthed man didn't want to see. If he offended the future island master's wife, he wouldn't have a good ending. The pointy-mouthed man's expression changed and his eyes suddenly flashed with coldness and ruthlessness. He gritted his teeth and said, "Bitch, you forced me to do this." As he spoke, he walked towards Qian Mo with an unfriendly look. He obviously didn't want what he was worried about to happen, and the only way to avoid it was to throw Qian Mo into the sea. As long as Qian Mo died, he could rest easy. Although he felt it was a pity, it was nothing compared to his own life. Qian Mo seemed to have expected this and didn't panic at all. Instead, she sneered, "You don't have to do it." As soon as she finished speaking, Qian Mo jumped down from the ship and looked like she was going to fight with Pang Zhan and the others. She would rather die than give in. The reason why she had said that she was going to sleep with him was because she had a slim chance of deterring the sharp-tongued man. Since her plan had not succeeded, she would not give in. She could only take the initiative to jump into the sea. After falling into the cold water, Qian Mo and Pang Zhan looked at each other and nodded slightly. They immediately prepared to escape in different directions. This time, there was no way to resolve the matter. Their only hope of survival was to escape from this place and stay away from the pointy-mouthed man and the beaver. The hope wasn't high, but they had to try. Moving in the sea race undoubtedly had the absolute advantage. After all, they were a race born in the sea. Boom boom boom, a muffled sound suddenly came from afar. It sounded as if someone was violently slapping the surface of the water. The rhythmic vibrations were transmitted through the surface of the water. At the same time, there were layers of ripples visible to the naked eye. The sound was getting closer and closer. The ripples became clearer and clearer, almost converging into a wave. Everyone was stunned for a moment and turned to look in the direction of the sound. They didn't know what had happened, even the aggressive beaver. It seemed to have sensed the approaching danger as well. It stopped moving and stopped on the surface of the sea. A row of water pillars shot up into the sky and pushed towards them at an extremely fast speed. In front of the water pillars, there was a figure. He had his hands behind his back and was walking on the sea. That rumbling sound. It was the collision when his feet stepped on the surface of the sea. Every step he took was accompanied by an indescribable concept of strength. After he left, a pillar of water shot up into the sky like a dragon behind him. This person was not young. He looked to be in his 50s or 60s, but his real age was definitely higher than that. The pointy-mouthed man and the cultivator of Serene Soul Island were stunned. They couldn't be more shocked. Because it was extremely difficult to walk on the surface of the sea with one's physical strength alone. Although they could do it, they definitely couldn't do it as well as this person, and couldn't do it for too long. But this old man who came. He looked like he was taking a stroll in the park. Other than the slightly loud sound, there was no sign of fatigue on his body, nor was there any sign of exhaustion. It seemed that as long as he wanted to, he could keep walking like this. How strong did one's physical strength have to be able to walk like this for such a long time? In the entire Serene Soul Island, the number of people who could do this could be counted on one hand. There was another person beside the old man. He looked younger and was a young man. The young man was sitting cross-legged on the surface of the sea, and he looked much more relaxed than the old man. He did not seem to be moving at all, but he was able to keep up with the old man without falling behind at all. When he got a little closer, the pointy-mouthed man realized that there was a sea beast under the young man's butt, carrying him forward. The pointy-mouthed man was stunned. It wasn't that the cultivator of Serene Soul Island had never tried to tame a sea beast, but even the island master had never succeeded. The sea beasts that lived in the coastal territory of Serene Soul Island, no matter how strong they were all stubborn and would rather die than submit. That was why the cultivator of Serene Soul Island had to give up after many attempts. But now, someone was sitting on the back of a sea beast. This shocked the pointy-mouthed man even more than the old man walking on the sea. The commotion caused by the old man and the young man naturally alarmed Pang Zhen, Qian Mo, and the others. Oh, he is. Pang Zhen looked at Yang Kai seriously for a long time before his eyes suddenly lit up. Qian Mo, on the other hand, stared at Yang Kai's buttocks with her beautiful eyes. There was some hesitation and disbelief in her beautiful eyes, but soon, a look of ecstasy appeared on her face. Leaping out of the sea, she quickly approached Yang Kai. She couldn't walk as leisurely as the old man, nor could she maintain this pace for too long. She could only rely on a spurt of energy, and when that energy ran out, Qian Mo could no longer move forward. However, she still approached Yang Kai crazily and excitedly, her pretty face filled with a smile of reunion. Old Shaw, do you know this woman? Yang Kai, sitting on the back of the little dolphin, turned to look at Shaw Hu and asked curiously. Shaw Hu laughed. This old master hasn't left the mountain for 100 years, how could I know anyone? Isn't this woman here to find you? Find me? Yang Kai smiled. That shouldn't be the case, she is a commander of Sea God Palace, I have nothing to do with her. Why does it seem like she really is here to find me? As the distance between them narrowed, Yang Kai also noticed that something was wrong. This woman named Qian Mo was really rushing towards him, waving her hand as she approached him, as if she was very familiar with him. Yang Kai scratched his head, puzzled, but since he couldn't respond rashly, he could only wait and see what would happen. The little dolphin under his buttocks suddenly let out a happy and aggrieved cry and accelerated towards Qian Mo. A moment later, Qian Mo arrived in front of Yang Kai. She didn't pay any attention to Yang Kai at all and instead approached the little dolphin. As if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders, she called out in a trembling voice, "Princess! Princess!" Kai Yang was dumbfounded, stunned on the spot. The little dolphin kept crying out excitedly and circled around Qian Mo. Finally, it plunged into Qian Mo's arms like a child who had seen its mother. It was acting like a spoiled child. Yang Kai looked down from above and saw that Qian Mo's full breasts were somewhat deformed by the little dolphin's head, revealing a deep ravine and a large expanse of white skin. Shaw Hu stood quietly to the side with his hands behind his back, glancing at Qian Mo and the little dolphin before nodding. So that's how it is, it turns out to be a member of the Dolphin Flood Dragon clan. No wonder this old master felt something was wrong. Yang Kai felt like he had just woken up from a dream. Qian Mo had called the little dolphin princess and Shaw Hu had said that the little dolphin was from the Dolphin Flood Dragon clan. Yang Kai immediately realized that the little dolphin he had accidentally bumped into had a great background. Obviously, this little dolphin was a member of the Sea Clan's royal family and was the Sea Clan's princess that Qian Mo and Shang Ao were looking for. For this reason, the two Sea Clan commanders had gone to Sunrise Island to make a scene. It seems that Qian Mo and Shang Ao were not lying. The Sea Clan's princess had indeed disappeared near Sunrise Island, but rather than being abducted by Sea Temple's people, she had broken into Serene Soul Island. Then, she was accidentally discovered. After finding the Sea Clan's princess, Qian Mo relaxed, not even caring about her own safety, allowing the little dolphin to act affectionately with her for a while before suddenly raising her head and glaring fiercely at Yang Kai. "You despicable human, what did you do to my princess? Daring to ride on her royal highness's back, you deserve to die 10,000 death." Yang Kai looked down at her and chuckled. What can I do to it? He did not become angry because of Qian Mo's attitude. The little dolphin's status was supreme among the Sea Clan, so it was only natural that Qian Mo would be so angry. "Why haven't you come down yet?" Qian Mo angrily rebuked. Yang Kai curled his lips. "If it doesn't want to carry me, I will come down." "Little guy, tell me, do you want me to come down?" These last words were directed at the little dolphin, and under Qian Mo's murderous gaze, Yang Kai even reached out and patted the little dolphin's head. Qian Mo's lungs were about to explode from anger. Although the princess was still young and could not assume human form, she was sacred and inviolable among the Sea Clan. Any Sea Clan member who saw her would have to respectfully salute her, but now, a despicable human was actually riding on her and even shamelessly patting her head. What angered Qian Mo the most was that the princess seemed to be enjoying herself, spitting out a few bubbles from her mouth and wagging her tail happily. "Look." Yang Kai spread his hands. "I didn't force it. Qian Mo took a deep breath and puffed out her full breasts, feeling the urge to punch Yang Kai to death. The little dolphin's mouth made a strange sound and Qian Mo listened attentively. After a long time, her expression relaxed slightly, but she still glared at Yang Kai with hatred. I don't know what kind of scheme you used to make the princess rely on you so much, but this matter isn't over yet, remember this. Yang Kai just shrugged and ignored her meaningless words. At this time, Pang Zhen also swam to Yang Kai's side and cupped his fists. Sect Master Yang, Island Master Pang, it's a small world. Yang Kai responded with a smile. Pang Zhen lowered his head and looked at his own state, feeling quite embarrassed. Fortunately, Yang Kai timely changed the topic and asked, "Why are you in such a sorry state? The people on that boat aren't from Sea Temple or Sea God Palace, right?" Chapter 17:11. Above the sea, Yang Kai listened to Pang Zhen's narration and learned what had happened after they entered Serene Soul Island. On that day, a total of 100 to 200 people from Sea Temple and Sea God Palace had fallen into Serene Soul Island, and except for a few who were killed by the Slender Man, everyone else had been escorted back unharmed. The total population of Serene Soul Island had always been small, so when such a large number of people suddenly appeared, Serene Soul Island naturally forced Pang Zhen and the others to pledge their loyalty. Under the eaves, people had no choice but to lower their heads, so Pang Zhen, Qian Mo, and the others could only feign obedience. However, Shang Ao, the other great commander of Sea God Palace, had a more violent temper. He had always been a high and respected figure, so how could he stand being manipulated and obeying orders? His rebellious nature made him seem somewhat out of place on Serene Soul Island, so he was taken away alone and detained, most likely tortured and beaten. Recently, Qian Mo and Pang Zhen had not seen Shang Ao again, so no one knew whether he was alive or dead. Except for Shang Ao, everyone else was divided into more than a dozen teams, each led by a different cultivator of Serene Soul Island and assuming different tasks. Qian Mo, Pang Zhen, and the others were tasked with searching for shadowed heaven lotuses out at sea, while others were tasked with mining ore in the mines of Serene Soul Island or doing odd jobs. These origin-returning realm masters had not had a good time after arriving on Serene Soul Island. Because of various accidents, many of them had died. In particular, going out to sea to search for shadowed heaven lotuses was a very dangerous task as they often encountered sea beasts that were difficult to resist. In the end, it was possible for them to be wiped out. However, no one cared about them. Any cultivator who had just arrived on Serene Soul Island had to experience this. Only when they recognized Serene Soul Island and recognized Ming Yu as its ruler would they be able to officially join. Only then would one be qualified to officially join Shadowed Soul Island and obtain Shadowed Heaven pills to temper one's physical strength. The most fundamental reason why Ming Yu was able to rule Serene Soul Island was not only because of his own strength. And it was because he controlled the Shadowed Heaven pill. Sect Master Yang, everyone in this damned place has incredibly powerful physiques. It seems they've all taken Shadowed Heaven pills. You can't fight them head-on. Pang Zhen saw Yang Kai's relaxed appearance and couldn't help reminding him. As he spoke, he turned back to look in the direction of the ship, his eyes filled with vigilance. He couldn't help but stare blankly. The reason for that was because he suddenly discovered that the old man who had his hands behind his back and was treading on the surface of the sea. She didn't know when he had boarded the boat, but he was just standing on the bow of the boat. The originally arrogant and domineering sharp-mouthed man and the others no longer had the awe-inspiring aura from before. Every one of them looked at the old man's back in horror, their faces pale. Not only were they unable to chase the old man off the boat, they didn't even have the courage to breathe. Where did this old man come from? There was no such person in the Supreme Ocean Palace or the Sea God's Palace. Could it be a friend that Yang Kai recently made on Serene Soul Island? Pang Zhen was puzzled. Old Shaw. My friends seem to have been bullied by them just now, Yang Kai called out to Shaw Hu. He actually had no friendship with Pang Zhen and had only met Qian Mo once, but in any case, they were still people from Shadowed Star and had nothing to do with the cultivators on Serene Soul Island. What's more, Yang Kai still had some ideas about Sea Temple and Sea God Palace, so he couldn't just stand by and watch them die. Shahu heard this and grinned. Bullied? That's easy. As soon as his voice fell, Shahu suddenly turned around and threw out a punch towards the sharp-mouthed man and the others. His fist was about 5 meters away from the sharp-mouthed man and his companions. However, a fierce aura erupted from this fist and swept across the sharp-mouthed man and his companions. Asterisk peng peng peng. Asterisk a series of muffled bangs rang out as the sharp-mouthed man and his companions didn't even have the chance to utter a sound before their bodies were blasted apart by Shahu, their blood and flesh spraying across the sea. The sea immediately turned red. Pang Zhan, Qian Mo, and the others were stunned in place. The Serene Soul Island cultivators, which they couldn't resist at all, had been easily defeated by this old man. Just how strong was this old man? They couldn't even begin to imagine. Since arriving on Serene Soul Island, Pang Zhan, Qian Mo, and the others' perceptions of strength had been completely subverted. Here, there was a different standard to measure the strength of a cultivator on Star's territory, and that was physical strength. The only explanation for this scene was that the old man's physical strength had already reached an unimaginable level. Sect Master Yang, this senior, what is his background? Pang Zhan asked weakly as Qian Mo also cast a concerned look towards him. Old Shaw's real name is Shahu, don't you remember? Yang Kai looked at Pang Zhan with a smile. Shahu. Pang Zhan frowned as a thoughtful look appeared on his face, seemingly recalling something as he stared straight in the direction of Shahu. After a while, his eyes lit up as he cried out involuntarily, My Sea Temple's previous second temple master? You're from Sea Temple? Shahu looked at Pang Zhan. Pang Zhan couldn't care less about anything else and quickly rushed out of the sea, rushed to the ship, and knelt down, his voice trembling as he called out, Sunrise Island's Island Master Pang Zhan greets Martial Uncle Shaw. So you're Sunrise Island's Island Master. Shahu had heard Yang Kai mention Pang Zhan once before, but he didn't know who was the one. Hearing him introduce himself at this moment, Shahu understood and smiled gently. Get up, there's no need to be so polite. Many thanks, Martial Uncle. Pang Zhan was so excited that his face flushed red as he rubbed his hands and said, Disciple has long admired Martial Uncle Shaw's reputation but has never had the chance to meet him. I heard that Martial Uncle disappeared 300 years ago for no apparent reason, which was a matter of great regret. Disciple never imagined that he would be able to meet Martial Uncle on Serene Soul Island. Shahu laughed and said bluntly, Good flattery. Pang Zhan's old face flushed red, but he didn't show any embarrassment, simply grinning happily as he pointed to the cultivator and said, Martial Uncle, these are my Sea Temple's disciple. Shahu swept his eyes over the cultivator one by one before nodding lightly. Good, good. After 300 years, this old master has finally seen his family. You can rest assured, with this old master here, no one can harm a single hair on your head. The several Sea Temple disciples all wore excited expressions, as if they had found a great backer, all of them ecstatic. A moment ago, their fate was uncertain and their future was bleak, but the next moment, the previous second temple master, who had disappeared for 300 years, appeared in front of them and even killed several Serene Soul Island cultivators with a single punch, saving them from their current predicament and even declaring that he would protect them. So how could they not be happy? On the other hand, Qian Mo and the other sea race masters were a little disappointed. Fortunately, Pang Zhan had not forgotten them. During this time, the Sea Temple disciples and Sea God Palace had always supported each other. Now that Sea Temple had a great backer, they no longer had to worry about being bullied, so Pang Zhan naturally had to introduce Qian Mo and the others to him. Immediately, Pang Zhan pointed to Qian Mo and said, Martial Uncle Shaw, this is Commander Qian Mo of Sea God Palace. She was sent to Serene Soul Island with Martial Nephew and has received a lot of help from them over the past few days. Pang Zhan's words were not to flatter Qian Mo and the others, but to tell the truth, the main reason was that the sea race was naturally stronger than the human race in terms of physical fitness. From the fact that Shang Ao was able to contend with several Serene Soul Island cultivators at the beginning, it could be seen that the sea race was better at tempering their bodies than the human race. En. Shahu nodded non-committally. He was willing to ensure the safety of Pang Zhan and the others because they were of the same origin, but Shahu did not have a good impression of the sea race. When he was the second temple master of Sea Temple, He had dealt with this arrogant race many times and his hands were stained with the blood of many sea race cultivators. Shaw didn't want to care about the life and death of the sea race cultivators, but after seeing the little dolphin under Yang Kai, he suddenly smiled and said, "In that case, let's go together. Let's put aside the grievances between Sea Temple and Sea God Palace for the time being. If we have a chance to leave Serene Soul Island, we can talk about other things." "Many thanks, Martial Uncle Shaw." Pang Zhen couldn't help breathing a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Shaw would attack Qian Mo and the others. If such a thing really happened, he would definitely be accused of treachery and it would become a heart demon for Pang Zhen's future cultivation. Fortunately, Shaw was a reasonable person, so Yang Kai didn't have to worry about this. Qian Mo's expression was slightly complicated as she also thanked Shaw. The sea race and human race cultivators who had fallen into the water quickly boarded the ship again. Under Qian Mo's murderous gaze, Yang Kai had no choice but to follow the crowd and board the ship, allowing the little dolphin to swim alone behind the ship. Yang Kai suspected that if he continued to sit on the back of the sea race's princess, Qian Mo would definitely fight him to the death. However, he still couldn't believe that the little dolphin who only knew how to search for shadowed heaven lotuses was actually the sea race's princess. It could only be said that this was a bit too dramatic. Seemingly seeing Yang Kai's doubts, Qian Mo took the initiative to explain, "Since Her Highness was born, it has only been 5 years since she was born. According to your human race's calculations, she only has the intelligence of a 5-year-old child and is unable to transform into a human. Moreover, she is naturally playful. This time, she secretly snuck out of Sea God Palace but unexpectedly ended up on Serene Soul Island." Yang Kai nodded. "In short, this general must thank you for bringing back Her Highness for my sea race," Qian Mo said again. Yang Kai glanced at her in amazement. Qian Mo's expression became cold again, "But the matter of you insulting Her Highness is not over. This general will remember this and sooner or later will make you pay the price." "As you wish." Yang Kai didn't comment. On the other side, Pang Zhen was also asking Shaw about their next itinerary. Now that they had escaped the control of Serene Soul Island, they naturally didn't want to return to that damned place where they could only endure humiliation. But when he learned from Shaw that their destination was actually Serene Soul Island, Pang Zhen suddenly fell silent. "Are you afraid?" Shaw turned to look at Pang Zhen with a light smile on his face. Pang Zhen shook his head solemnly. "Disciple is not afraid, it's just that the strength Disciple and the others can display is too weak to provide Martial Uncle with much help. However, since Martial Uncle has made a decision, Disciple will naturally obey. Even if we die, we must bite off a piece of Serene Soul Island's flesh." Chapter 17:12. Shaw laughed and waved his hand. "There's no need for you. You haven't used shadowed heaven pills to quench your bodies, so you'll only die if you go. This time, Yang Kai and I will go. You, just hide in the distance and watch the show." "Sect Master Yang." Pang Zhen glanced suspiciously towards the stern where Yang Kai was and whispered, "Sect Master Yang is indeed a dragon among men. Disciple has fought with him before and was not his opponent, but he has only recently arrived on Serene Soul Island. How can he help Martial Uncle?" He had no doubt about Yang Kai's strength, but that was on the limitless ocean after all. It could be seen from his and Qian Mo's situation that a powerful cultivator in the outside world would not necessarily be as powerful here. As long as a cultivator had lived on Serene Soul Island for a few years, they could easily crush them. So when he heard Shaw say that he would only bring Yang Kai, Pang Zhen was a little worried. Shaw however, just smiled bitterly. "What do you know? Even this old man is no match for him, so do you think he can help?" "Heh." Pang Zhen's mouth opened wide enough to fit an egg, his face filled with shock, almost suspecting that he had heard wrong. Glancing back at Yang Kai standing at the stern, Pang Zhen found that Yang Kai was smiling innocently at him and couldn't help shivering. There's no need to doubt it, this little brat is indeed stronger than this old master. A month ago, I exchanged a few moves with him and was repelled by a single palm strike, but now. Shaw didn't continue, but Pang Zhen understood what he meant. Shaw meaning was obvious. A month ago, He had been repelled by Yang Kai with a single palm strike, and now he was even worse off. Pang Zhen became even more shocked. Everyone had fallen on Serene Soul Island together, and over the past 2 or 3 months, their strength had not grown at all. They had been ordered around by the cultivator on Serene Soul Island, doing meaningless things, but Yang Kai was able to defeat his martial uncle Shaw, who had lived here for 300 years. Was this little brat a monster? The ship was not big, but it sailed smoothly on the sea. The little dolphin pushed him from behind from time to time, but its speed was not slow. In less than 5 days, the Serene Soul Island could be seen in the distance. Just wait here. Wait for this old man to finish his business. Then I'll bring you guys up. Shaw Hu ordered before tossing a bottle of Shadowed Heaven pills to Pang Zhen. Everyone, take one and refine them. Pang Zhen took it and was overjoyed. He had been coveting the Shadowed Heaven pills on Serene Soul Island for a long time. He also knew that the reason the cultivator on Serene Soul Island was stronger than him was because of this pill. Unfortunately, he never had the means to obtain it. Originally, they had to wait until they officially joined Serene Soul Island before they were qualified to carry out missions and receive varying amounts of Shadowed Heaven pills from the Island Master. This process was going to be very long. Perhaps 80% of the people would die before they could wait until then due to some reason. And even if they did get it, the quantity would be very small, and the quality would be even lower. But now, Shaw Hu had thrown him a bottle. Pang Zhen respectfully thanked him. Without delay, Shaw Hu opened the bottle cap and distributed a pill to each of the Sea Temple's disciples. Qian Mo looked on enviously from the side, but just as she was feeling bitter and depressed, she suddenly noticed something flying towards her from the corner of her eye. Reaching out, she caught it in the palm of her hand. Looking up, she found Yang Kai looking at her with a smile. Saying, "You can also share a pill with each of you." Qian Mo blinked and coldly snorted, "This general will return it to you in the future." "We'll talk about it later." Yang Kai smiled and followed Shaw Hu towards Serene Soul Island. The little dolphin let out a strange cry from behind, as if warning Yang Kai to be careful along the way. Giving Qian Mo a bottle of Shadowed Heaven pills was not something Yang Kai had done on a whim, but because he knew. Even if he didn't give it to her, the little dolphin would ask him for it. The relationship between it and Qian Mo was obviously very close, so it would naturally think for her. As for the Shadowed Heaven lotus in Yang Kai's hands, it was almost all thanks to the little dolphin. It could be said that half of the Shadowed Heaven lotus and Shadowed Heaven pills were thanks to the little dolphin. A bottle of Shadowed Heaven pills was nothing to Yang Kai. Up ahead, Shaw Hu slowed down his pace, obviously waiting for Yang Kai. After Yang Kai caught up with him, Shaw Hu said with a dignified expression, "Yang Kai, this old master's purpose on this trip is only to kill that bastard Mingyu. On Serene Soul Island, Mingyu is the strongest, but there are also some who are not weak. When the time comes, I will need you to help this old master hold the fort." "No problem," Yang Kai readily agreed before asking, "How confident is old Shaw in fighting Mingyu?" Shaw Hu's expression became serious as he thought seriously for a while before replying, "At least 60%. Although this old master and Mingyu haven't seen each other for 100 years, and his strength has definitely increased, but with those inferior Shadowed Heaven pills, his strength can't increase by much. This old master is more or less confident that I can kill him." "Then I wish old Shaw victory in advance," Yang Kai said with a smile. Shaw Hu was in high spirits. Since taking the Shadowed Heaven pills refined by Yang Kai, his strength, which had remained stagnant, began to soar. Although he still could not compare to Yang Kai, he was already extremely strong compared to others. Compared to the Shadowed Heaven pills refined by Yang Kai, Shaw Hu felt that the Shadowed Heaven pills he had taken before were simply dogshit. Not only was the quality extremely low and difficult to refine, but the medicinal efficacy was also impure. While enhancing one's physical strength, it also brought some hidden dangers to one's body. These hidden dangers could not be seen in a short time, but if one took these Shadowed Heaven pills for a long time, there would definitely be problems. Now that Ming Yu no longer had the advantage of the Shadowed Heaven pills, Shaw Hu simply did not put him in his eyes. The speed of the two was extremely fast, and it was not long before they arrived on Shadowed Soul Island. Looking at the city at the center of the island, Shahu sneered and sped up, leaving behind only an afterimage in his wake. Yang Kai unhurriedly followed behind Shahu, not falling behind in the slightest. Serene Soul City was the only city on Serene Soul Island, with 7,000 to 8,000 cultivator living in it. It was also the only stronghold on Serene Soul Island. It was unknown when this city had been built, but the ancient walls were engraved with the traces of the flowing time Great Emperor. Almost every cultivator who had fallen on Serene Soul Island would come to this city. In Serene Soul City, the one with the highest status was the island master of Serene Soul Island, Mingyu, followed by several of his trusted subordinates, who were in charge of the entire Serene Soul Island and controlled the flow of Shadowed Heaven pills. Any cultivator living on Serene Soul Island who wanted to obtain Shadowed Heaven pills had to submit to Mingyu's rule. At the city gate, 4 or 5 cultivator wearing armor were monitoring the passing cultivators. Any cultivator who returned from sea territory would have to hand over half of what they had obtained before they were allowed to leave. The most precious Shadowed Heaven lotus would be collected in full, not left for any cultivator. Any cultivator who dared to take a Shadowed Heaven lotus would be punished with the harshest punishment. Groups of exhausted cultivators who had returned from sea were waiting outside the city gate, preparing to enter Serene Soul City. Many of these cultivators were injured, and some were even missing an arm or a leg. They looked extremely miserable, obviously having been attacked by sea beasts while they were out at sea and had suffered heavy losses. The few cultivators wearing armor were checking the harvest of the cultivators waiting to enter the city when they suddenly heard a cry of surprise from the crowd. The leader of the cultivators frowned and was about to reprimand them, but then he seemed to have sensed something and turned his head to look into the distance. On the other side, 2 silhouettes were rapidly approaching Spectre City. Their speed was as fast as lightning, leaving a long trail of afterimages behind them. Only after the 2 had covered a distance of 1,000 jong did the trail of afterimages gradually disappear. The leader of the cultivators turned pale with fright and signaled to his companions. They all took out their secret treasures and stood in front of the city gate. When the 2 figures were about to approach, he shouted, "Who are you? Stop right there. Get lost." With an angry shout, the 2 figures rushed through the city gate one after the other and broke into Serene Soul City. The cultivators who were waiting in line to enter the city were in an uproar, and they all looked surprised. The management of Serene Soul Island was very strict, and it had been many years since someone forced their way into the city. But today, they saw it with their own eyes. Many people couldn't help but mourn for the 2 who had forced their way into the city. They felt that these 2 people were doomed. Daring to challenge Mingyu's authority in Serene Soul City, they were destined to die without a burial place. But before they could finish their thoughts, they heard a loud bang. Turning their heads, they were shocked to find that the leader of the cultivators in front of them had exploded, leaving behind a large amount of blood and minced meat. The onlookers only felt a chill run down their spines and kept quiet out of fear. They didn't even know when the leader of the cultivators had been hit. At the same time, an angry roar resounded from the city, "Mingyu, get out here for this old master." The roar was earth-shattering and deafening, and many people couldn't help but turn pale. However, there were also those who were eager to see the world plunged into chaos. After being stunned for a moment, their eyes lit up with excitement as they quickly moved closer to the source of the voice. They wanted to see who was the audacious person who dared to call Mingyu by her name in Spectre City. The entire Serene Soul City was in chaos, and under Shahu's roar, countless cultivators gathered in his direction. In a short time, more than 2,000 people had gathered, and the number was still increasing. Shahu stood quietly on a street in Serene Soul City, his hands behind his back and his expression indifferent. Kai Yang followed behind him, a bored look on his face as he scanned his surroundings. Serene Soul City looked pretty good, and although it was a little shabby, it was a great achievement to be able to establish a stronghold in this damned place. There were even some shops near the street selling daily necessities. But at this moment, the people in the nearby shops had already left. Under Shahu's astonishing aura, no one dared to stay nearby and had all hidden far away. Whispers could be heard all around, and many cultivators were pointing at Yang Kai and Shahu. Some were gloating, some were indifferent, and some were eager to take action. Chapter 17:13. Old Thing, you dare to offend the dignity of Lord Island Master? Hand over your life. From a distance, an angry roar came, and from the end of the street, a figure rushed towards Shaw, who aggressively, shouting loudly as he rushed, obviously wanting to take credit for himself. Serene Soul Island's management was extremely strict, and there were very few riots or uncontrollable events, so the cultivator who followed Mingyu rarely had the opportunity to show off. Today was undoubtedly a good opportunity, and this person had taken advantage of this opportunity to make a move on Shaw, who, if he could win the favor of Mingyu, a bottle of high-quality Shadowed Heaven pills would definitely not escape his grasp. So after hearing Shaw Hu's roar, this person immediately rushed over. Halfway through, Yang Kai summoned a heavy saber-shaped artifact and gripped it tightly in his hand, giving off an imposing aura. Coupled with his burly body, Yang Kai gave off the feeling that he could kill anyone who stood in his way, regardless of who stood in his way. Shaw, who just stood quietly in place, his eyes fixed on the tallest building in the center of the island. There seemed to be a pair of gloomy eyes staring at him from afar, colliding with Shaw, whose gaze in midair. An invisible force caused the temperature of the entire Serene Soul Island to drop significantly, causing many people to shiver uncontrollably. The burly man holding the saber didn't notice this at all and rushed all the way to within 10 meters of Shaw, who before leaping up high, the long saber in his hand drawing a brilliant arc as a sneer appeared on his face. "Old dog, your head is mine." Shaw, who slowly turned his head and looked at the person who had just arrived. With this glance, the burly man's face froze. The newcomer sucked in a breath of cold air, and an incomparably frightened expression appeared on his face. His indomitable momentum was like a snowflake under the scorching sun, and in an instant, it disappeared into nothingness. A strange sound came from his throat. Letting out a long sigh, this burly man fell straight down from the air, his feet sinking deep into the ground as he stared at Shaw, who, his voice trembling as he called out, "Shaw. Island Master Shaw?" This burly man obviously recognized Shaw, who. Shaw, who sneered coldly, "Juan, after not seeing you for 100 years, it seems you haven't grown at all." The brawny man named Juan looked embarrassed. Then, he said angrily, "Have I made any improvements? It's not up to you to decide. Instead, how are you still alive, Island Master Shaw?" "Mingyu said I died." Shaw, who sneered as he stared at Juan like he was an idiot, "You believe what he said? Not only am I not dead, but I'm also not dead." He was still living a comfortable life. Today, they had come to take Mingyu's head. To vent the hatred in my heart. Juan's expression flickered. Although he was frightened, his attitude remained firm. "Shaw Hu, don't be delusional. The strength of Dark Moon Island's Island Master has improved greatly in the past 100 years. You were not his opponent back then, and you are still not his opponent today. Obediently surrender and follow me to see the Island Master. Maybe you can escape this disaster, otherwise." "Otherwise what? Island Master was able to defeat you 100 years ago, but you are still no match for him 100 years later," Juan shouted. Shaw, who laughed, "Idiot, didn't Mingyu tell you that the reason he was so skilled back then was because he used poison? Since this old master has made a comeback today, I will not give him a chance." Shaw, who ignored Juan and instead turned to the tallest building on the island and roared, "Mingyu, if you don't have the guts to come down and fight this old master will go up." As soon as these words fell, Shaw, whose figure leapt up more than 100 meters into the air, like a great peng spreading its wings as he approached the center of the island. Wishful thinking. Suddenly, angry shouts came from all around, and at least a dozen cultivator wrapped in red light rushed out from the crowd to intercept Shaw Hu. The red light around these cultivators' body was a clear sign of their vitality, and from the intensity of this light, it was easy to infer their vitality. Some of the Serene Soul Island cultivators Yang Kai had encountered before were either too weak or had not used their full strength, so they did not show such signs. But at this moment, after learning Shaw Hu's true identity, the dozen or so masters from Serene Soul Island no longer cared about hiding their strength and used their full strength. Shaw Hu ignored the pincer attack of the dozen or so cultivators and simply stared coldly forward, his eyes showing neither sadness nor joy, neither surprise nor fear, only a murderous intent. The dozen or so cultivators were overjoyed, and each of them desperately pushed the strength in their bodies to send out a powerful attack towards Shaw Hu. But before their attacks could reach him, a young man strangely appeared behind Shaw Hu and quietly floated in the air, as if he was flying. Facing the fierce pincer attack of the dozen or so cultivators, this young man still smiled lightly and waited until they were close enough before punching out with both fists. In the air, a series of fist images rained down like a violent storm, blasting in all directions. More than a dozen figures, the crimson light on their bodies burst like bubbles one after another. Every one of them seemed to have suffered a heavy blow, flying backwards amidst screams and cries of alarm. Among them, the bodies of several people even exploded in midair. Hong hong hong. The remaining cultivators who were not dead smashed into the nearby houses, creating large holes in them one after another. Amidst the blood, there were bits and pieces of internal organs, many of them falling to the ground, their vitality fading. The thousands of onlookers were in an uproar as they stared at the young man who was still floating in the air, everyone's eyes filled with horror. The dozen or so people who had just attacked Shaw Hu were all famous masters on Serene Soul Island. No one knew how strong they were in the outside world, but on Serene Soul Island, each one of them was strong enough to rank in the top 100. They were all capable subordinates of Ming Yu. But in the face of this young man's attacks, more than a dozen of them had died or been injured, none of them able to get up. It could be said that they had all been wiped out. Who was this young man? Why had they never seen him before? Compared to this young man, Shaw Hu's name was already known to many people. On Serene Soul Island, Juan was not the only one who recognized Shaw Hu. Among the onlookers, many of them also remembered the island master, Shaw Hu, from 100 years ago. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and soon, all the cultivators on Serene Soul Island knew what the situation was. The former island master had come to seek revenge on the current island master. This was a once-in-a-lifetime show, and no one wanted to miss it. However, the young man who had just displayed his invincible might was standing in front of them, so no one dared to chase after him. Those cultivators who obeyed Ming Yu did not dare to act rashly either. The miserable state of the dozen or so cultivators was still vivid in their minds, and they could still hear the weak screams of pain echoing in their ears. As long as they did not want to die, they would not dare to provoke Yang Kai again. Yang Kai glanced around and said with a smile, "Old Shaw wants to challenge Ming Yu. All of you should just watch from afar. If anyone dares to step forward, don't blame this Yang for being ruthless." Normally, when such an unknown young man said such words, no one would pay attention to him, but after he had repelled the joint attack of more than a dozen masters, his words carried absolute authority. No one dared to provoke him. The onlookers simply stood in place and watched from a distance, wanting to know who was stronger between the former island master and the current island master. At the center of the island, a great battle had obviously broken out. Shaw Hu's angry roar could be heard from far away, as if he was in the mood to kill. Even from more than a dozen kilometers away, the concepts of strength triggered by the collision of fists and feet could be clearly transmitted. The sound of explosions and tremors in the air poured into everyone's ears, causing their blood to boil and fear to boil. Yang Kai stood in place and thought for a moment before drawing a line on the ground with his finger and then walking towards the battlefield without looking back. Even after he left, no one dared to cross the line and could only watch the shocking battle from afar. Although they couldn't see it clearly, they could only endure the anxiety in their hearts. A distance of more than a dozen kilometers was crossed by Yang Kai in just a dozen breaths. At the foot of the tallest building in the center of the island, there were already a number of bloody corpses lying on the ground, obviously killed by Shaw Hu. There were also some other cultivators standing not far away, paying close attention with bewildered looks on their faces. They didn't dare to step forward and intervene at will. When Shaw Hu first arrived here, he had killed several of them in a flash, establishing a fierce and peerless image. Unless these people wanted to die, they wouldn't dare to find trouble with Shaw Hu. Now, only Ming Yu was fighting with Shaw Hu alone. Yang Kai didn't put the spectating masters in his eyes and instead cast his gaze towards Ming Yu. Ming Yu was a scholarly middle-aged man dressed like a Confucian scholar, and in terms of temperament, he was somewhat similar to Clear Sky Sect's great elder Mo Yu. However, his physical strength was countless times greater than Mo Yu's. The dark red light around his body was extremely dense, demonstrating the tyrannical power of his vitality. Every movement he made was accompanied by the roars of dragons and tigers, seemingly capable of splitting the heavens and earth. Shaohu's vitality was in no way inferior to Ming Yu's. When Yang Kai arrived, the two of them were still engaged in a fierce battle that left huge craters in the ground one after another. The surrounding buildings had all collapsed, and even the central building had a wall collapsed and was leaning to one side. Yang Kai watched for a moment and couldn't help raising his brow. Shaohu regarded Ming Yu as his greatest enemy, and every time he mentioned Ming Yu, the hatred in his eyes was not without reason. Yang Kai was certain that 3 months ago, Shaohu was definitely not Ming Yu's opponent. Judging from Shaohu's strength when they first met, he wouldn't have lasted more than 100 breaths against Ming Yu. However, over the past 3 months, Shaohu had taken a lot of shadowed heaven pills. He had refined himself and had made a certain degree of breakthrough in his physical strength, making him even stronger than he was 3 months ago. This was why he was able to fight evenly with Ming Yu without falling behind. The battle between the two was extremely brutal, almost exchanging injuries for injuries. This kind of fighting style was most suitable for a cultivator with a powerful physical body. Because one's physique was strong and their vitality was abundant, the injuries they suffered would not be too serious and it would be easier for them to recover. Yang Kai had used this kind of fighting style more than once to kill powerful enemies. However, in a situation where the physical strength of the two was balanced, this kind of fighting style was really just exchanging injuries for injuries. What determined the final victory was one's own willpower and determination. In this regard, Shaohu undoubtedly had the advantage. Chapter 1714. Little Ming Yu, you didn't think you would have such a day, did you? This old master will never forget the enmity of the past. Today, this place will be your burial ground. Shaohu shouted as he fought with Ming Yu, his two fists twisting like pythons as they passed through Ming Yu's defenses from an incredible angle and slammed into his chest. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the red light around Ming Yu's body trembled violently, but the effect was not great and he quickly recovered. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ming Yu used his hand as a blade and slashed down fiercely, his palm seemingly transforming into a peerless blade as it struck Shaohu's shoulder. Shaohu's body sank and he grimaced in pain for a moment. To be honest, the fact that you were able to live to this day really surprised this island. Ming Yu's voice was calm, a stark contrast to Shaohu's violent rage, but what surprised this island even more is that your strength has grown to such an extent. It seems you have had many fortuitous encounters in the past 100 years. Shaohu laughed loudly. No fortuitous encounters, but I did meet a noble. Ming Yu frowned slightly and glanced in the direction of Yang Kai. Almost instantly, he understood the hidden message in Shaohu's words and felt that this unfamiliar face, Yang Kai, should be the noble Shaohu spoke of. Ming Yu, you are no longer this old master's opponent. This old master will tear you to pieces. Shaohu continued to roar, seemingly in a frenzy, but in his heart, he knew better than anyone that it was impossible to defeat Ming Yu just by relying on hot-bloodedness and impulsiveness. These seemingly meaningless words were only meant to disturb Ming Yu's mind. This island master will wait and see. Ming Yu's tone was still indifferent, as if he did not put Shaohu in his eyes at all. In the middle of the battle, the two figures were entangled, their fists landing on flesh, blood splashing everywhere, and from time to time, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. This was simple and violent. This fierce and thrilling battle caused all the onlookers to be stunned. Needless to say, Ming Yu's subordinates had never seen Ming Yu use his full strength before. At this moment, they realized that Ming Yu had not become the island master by luck. His true battle prowess was much stronger than theirs. Even Kai Yang was watching from the side with great interest. Although Yang Kai was confident that his physical strength was stronger than Ming Yu and Shaohu's, he knew that both Ming Yu and Shaohu were powerful cultivators who had made great achievements in the aspect of physical strength. There weren't many opportunities to observe such a cultivator's battle up close. He put himself in their shoes, observing and deducing the direction of the battle, and actually gained some small gains. Time passed slowly. The battle between Shaw Hu and Ming Yu continued at an astonishing speed and intensity, but they were still evenly matched. It was impossible to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. During the battle, the two of them would stuff some shadowed heaven pills into their mouths from time to make up for the consumption of their qi and blood and the lack of physical strength. He kept the crimson light outside his body in its strongest state. Ming Yu's subordinates were secretly nervous. They didn't know what would happen to them if Ming Yu was defeated. Although they wanted to help, they didn't have the courage, so they could only turn their attention to Yang Kai. However, after Yang Kai killed the two people who came to provoke him, the rest of them no longer dared to act rashly. Among these people, their strength was basically equal. Even if there was someone stronger, they couldn't be that strong. Yang Kai had crushed two of their companions like ants, so if they still couldn't see how strong Yang Kai was, they would be blind. The battle here started quickly and ended quickly, so it didn't affect the battle between Ming Yu and Shaw Hu. However, after perceiving Yang Kai's strength, Ming Yu obviously paid more attention to him. Shaw Hu immediately seized this opportunity and began bombarding Ming Yu with all his strength. The stalemate began to slowly tilt in Shaw Hu's favor. Shaw Hu's momentum grew stronger. The crimson light outside his body was even stronger than before, and with an irresistible momentum, it madly suppressed Ming Yu. Ming Yu's situation became more and more tense. The several cultivators who had been standing nearby watching the battle also turned pale. Even they could see that the battle was beginning to turn against Ming Yu. Although the degree was very subtle, in the long run, Ming Yu's disadvantage would only grow bigger and bigger, and he would eventually be defeated. Was Shaw Hu really so strong? They could hardly believe it. Yang Kai also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, the strength of Ming Yu and Shaw Hu was absolutely evenly matched. At the beginning of the battle, even Yang Kai had not been able to predict the outcome of the battle, but now, if nothing unexpected happened, Shaw Hu's victory was almost certain. Ming Yu would not be able to reverse his decline. Indeed, as Yang Kai expected, as time passed, Ming Yu's disadvantage grew bigger and bigger while Shaw Hu became fiercer and fiercer. Out of 10 moves, 8 of them were on the offensive, while Ming Yu could only passively defend, his momentum slowly being worn down. In the end, when Ming Yu struck out with his palm and revealed an opening, Shaw Hu took advantage of this opportunity and roared, "Ming Yu!" This roar seemed to be able to vent the anger he had accumulated over 100 years. Pushing his blood force madly, Shaw Hu dodged Ming Yu's blow and thrust his hand towards Ming Yu's heart. Victory seemed to be within his grasp. A fierce grin appeared on Shaw Hu's face. Ming Yu, whose life was hanging by a thread, showed no signs of panic as he glanced indifferently at Shaw Hu, the corners of his mouth suddenly curling into a sarcastic smile as he said lightly, "Shaw Hu, you will never know how strong this island master is." Shaw Hu's heart clenched as he instinctively felt that the situation was not good. Just as he was about to withdraw, a burst of Saint Qi surged from Ming Yu's body, causing his already tyrannical momentum to soar and a protective layer of Saint Qi to appear around his body, blocking Shaw Hu's blow. The power of his Sha suddenly burst out. Shaw Hu felt as if he had fallen into a swamp and was unable to break free, his state of mind instantly affected by Ming Yu's Sha. Ming Yu struck out with his palm and struck Shaw Hu's chest. *WA. With a loud bang, Shaw Hu was sent flying backwards, blood spraying from his mouth. After he staggered to the ground, the red light around his body had dimmed greatly and his face was extremely pale. He stared blankly at Ming Yu who was standing over there, his eyes trembling violently as he called out, "How did you? You can still use your Saint Qi, right?" Ming Yu smiled faintly. Shadowed Soul Island has its own world principles, so it is impossible for any cultivator who enters here to use their Saint Qi. This is indeed the case. However, this island master broke the world principles here, so I am the island master, not you. Impossible. Shaw Hu roared, his face filled with unwillingness. Nothing is impossible, Ming Yu laughed lightly. Ming Yu smiled lightly, looking down on the blood-soaked Shaw Hu, as if to prove his words, a burst of power burst out from his body. This was Saint Qi. This was the Saint Qi fluctuations of a third-order origin returning realm master. Shaw Hu was dumbfounded as he stood in place. In terms of physical strength alone, Yang Kai was on par with Ming Yu. Just now, he had been able to almost kill Ming Yu because of his 100 years of endurance and perseverance, but if Ming Yu could use his Saint Chi, Yang Kai would not be his opponent at all. Shaohu opened his mouth but found that he could not utter a single word. The continuous high-intensity battle had almost exhausted him, and after realizing that Ming Yu was no match for him, the momentum he had been maintaining suddenly dissipated and a sense of exhaustion immediately overwhelmed him. A hand gently rested on his shoulder and Shaohu turned his head with a pale face, only to find that Yang Kai was standing next to him at some point. Yang Kai. Shaohu's voice was dry. I'm sorry, this old master has implicated you. He had misjudged the situation. This time, he had failed to take revenge and not only would he die here, but Yang Kai would also be buried with him. Being able to use his Saint Chi on Serene Soul Island meant that Ming Yu was basically the master of this place, and no one could resist him. Old Shaw is too serious. Take a rest and let me handle this. Yang Kai smiled lightly, not showing the fear Shaohu had imagined. Shaohu was surprised, not knowing what Yang Kai was relying on to face an opponent who could use his Saint Chi and Shi, but seeing him so calm and composed, Shaohu could not help feeling encouraged and nodded before taking a few steps back. Ming Yu did not speak again, simply staring at Yang Kai with interest. Seeing him stare back at him without the slightest fear, Ming Yu smiled slightly and said, "How about joining me? I can make you the Vice Island Master of Serene Soul Island. From then on, you will be second only to me." Several of Ming Yu's subordinates immediately directed envious looks towards Yang Kai, their brow furrowed slightly, as if they were waiting for Yang Kai to agree so they could step forward and flatter him. Vice Island Master, this was an unprecedented position. On Serene Soul Island, although Ming Yu was the Island Master, no one had ever been able to become a Vice Island Master. Ming Yu did not seem to have any intention of establishing such a position. His subordinates had tried many times to become Vice Island Master, but Ming Yu had never agreed. None of them dared to act too rashly and could only leave things as they were. But today, Ming Yu had taken the initiative to extend an olive branch to Yang Kai, so how could these cultivators not be envious? Not interested. To their surprise, Yang Kai shook his head and refused without even thinking about it. How could the trivial position of Vice Island Master of Serene Soul Island enter Yang Kai's eyes? He was the Star Master of Shadowed Star. If Serene Soul Island had not become an independent space with its own world principles, it would definitely belong to Shadowed Star and be dominated by Yang Kai. Wouldn't becoming the Vice Island Master of Serene Soul Island be lowering his status? Ming Yu raised his brow and said lightly, "This Island Master is a little disappointed." Yang Kai chuckled and said, "You'll be even more disappointed. Do you want to oppose this Island Master?" Ming Yu stared at Yang Kai with scorching eyes. "Not really, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together." Ming Yu frowned and sighed, "In that case, this Island Master will grant you death." Yang Kai laughed, "You don't have the ability." Old Shaw was right about one thing. What? Ming Yu and Shaw who asked at the same time. "It's impossible for you to break the world principles here," Yang Kai sneered. Chapter 17-15. World principles were extremely profound. Yang Kai, as the master of Shadowed Star, was unable to break through the world principles of Shadowed Star, so how could Ming Yu possibly do so? Therefore, Yang Kai concluded that Ming Yu must have used some special method to be able to use his Saint Chi. Yang Kai was very curious about this method. Ming Yu's expression was slightly startled, but he did not show any signs of panic, simply frowning as he asked, "You are not this Island Master. How do you know this Island Master cannot break through the world principles here?" "I just know." Yang Kai smiled lightly, a look of certainty on his face. Yang Kai's confident look caused Ming Yu's face to become gloomy, and his attitude was no longer as easygoing as before as he coldly snorted, "Regardless of whether this Island Master can break through the world principles, this Island Master can use his Saint Chi. Boy, you're dead. Who doesn't know how to boast? I just don't know if you have such ability." Yang Kai suddenly shouted, "Come out." As soon as he finished speaking, a clear and resonant cry of a bird suddenly resounded through the sky. Accompanied by this loud cry, A huge and beautiful firebird that seemed to be burning with flames suddenly flew out from his body. Spreading its wings, this firebird covered almost half the sky, and a scorching hot aura instantly filled the air. Everyone stared at this giant firebird in shock, feeling the rich fire attribute energy radiating from its body, some of their faces turning pale. Ming Yu's expression also became extremely dignified. He was shocked to discover that this firebird, which did not have a physical body and was composed entirely of energy, not only did it contain a fierce fire attribute energy, but it also contained a violent thunder attribute energy. Inside this firebird's fiery body, there was a dazzling purple glow that seemed to dance around like a snake. Lightning and fire? Even with Ming Yu's rich experience and knowledge, he was unable to figure out what this firebird was. However, this was not the end of it though. After the firebird appeared, a simple-looking stone man appeared in front of Yang Kai. This small stone man looked charmingly naive. However, this stone man was carrying a giant black stick on its shoulder. The contrast between this giant stick and its small body was quite comical. The moment the tiny stone golem appeared, it let out a low growl. His body grew rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, he had turned into a stone giant that was over 100 feet tall. Even the pitch-black rod on its shoulder had become thicker and longer. Everyone raised their heads and looked up. An indescribable pressure descended from the sky, making it difficult for them to breathe. Elysian Moon's face finally changed. She looked at Yang Kai in horror. "Get him," Yang Kai ordered. The cries of birds and the roars of beasts resounded throughout the entire Serene Soul Island. The firebird suddenly flapped its wings and arrived above Ming Yu's head in the blink of an eye. Its majestic phoenix eyes looked down and opened its beak. A bolt of lightning fell from the sky towards Ming Yu. Ming Yu cried out involuntarily. How could she dare to stay where she was? He immediately used his movement technique to dodge. With a boom, the ground was filled with dust. A huge crater had appeared where Elysian Moon had been standing. Before Elysian Moon could react, a series of hurried and heavy footsteps approached. Dong dong dong. The stone mongoose took a step forward. Those two big feet were like drumsticks, fiercely hitting the ground, making a sound like a war drum. 200 meters away from Ming Yu, the stone mongoose swung its heaven-shaking pillar. The several 100,000-kilogram heaven-shaking pillar was like a toy in its hands, weightless. However, the violent wind it created almost sent Ming Yu flying. Ming Yu's face suddenly turned pale as he stretched out his hand. After a flash of light, a pitch-black hexagonal shield appeared in front of him. This hexagonal shield rotated rapidly, exuding an origin-grade mid-rank aura. It was obvious at a glance that its defensive strength was extremely high. It was impossible for an ordinary origin returning realm master to break this shield in one blow. However, Ming Yu did not relax at all. Instead, his expression became even more dignified as he leapt backwards. Hong. The sky-shaking pillar slammed into the hexagonal shield, and the hexagonal shield was unable to block it for even a moment. It was shattered into countless pieces, and the sky-shaking pillar continued on its way towards Elysian Moon. Fortunately, Ming Yu reacted quickly and managed to avoid this terrifying blow, but the aftershock of the pole still forced him into a miserable state. His clothes were instantly torn apart as a gust of wind tore through his body, causing crimson blood to flow from all over his body. The cry of a bird rang out above Ming Yu's head. Looking up, Ming Yu's heart sank to the bottom. He found that the huge firebird had once again arrived above him, a series of snake-like bolts of thunder and fire shooting out from its body and enveloping the area several dozen meters around him. There was no way to avoid it. Lightning flashed and thunder roared as flames soared into the sky, instantly turning the surrounding several dozen meters into a living hell. All of Serene Soul Island shuddered. Ming Yu's subordinates had long ago lost the ability to think as they watched Ming Yu's figure being swallowed up by the countless bolts of thunder and fire, all of them feeling like they had fallen into an ice cellar. Even someone as strong as Shaw, who was trembling in shock. Only now did he realize that Yang Kai had not used his full strength when fighting with him. At that time, if Yang Kai had released this strange stone giant and firebird, how could he have survived? Whether it was the stone giant or the firebird, they could have easily crushed him. The physical strength Shaw who was so proud of was nothing in front of these two strange creatures. Fortunately, the relationship between him and Kai Yang wasn't too bad, and they had even turned from enemies to friends. Thinking so, Shaw who felt some lingering fear, but at the same time, he secretly rejoiced at his wise decision. But, just what is the origin of this Yang Kai? With such powerful strength, wouldn't it be enough to sweep across all of Shadowed Star? It seemed that after this time, Shaw who would have to ask Pang Zhen about Yang Kai's origins. Shaw who secretly made up his mind before his consciousness once again drifted back to the battlefield. What he saw though, he could not help letting out a soft sigh. He found that Ming Yu, who was at the center of this hellish world, had not died immediately and was instead still showing signs of vitality. Shaw who did not know how Ming Yu did it. After all, if it had been him, even if he had 10 lives, he would have died instantly. Yang Kai obviously also noticed this, but instead of being surprised, he observed Ming Yu with great interest. After a short while, the scene of thunder, lightning, and flames disappeared and instead, Ming Yu stood in the center of the scorched earth, gasping for breath, looking extremely distressed. At this moment, he no longer had his previous elegant demeanor. His clothes were almost completely tattered, his hair was disheveled, and his skin was scorched black. The vitality in his body was also intermittent. If it were not for his strong physique, he would have already died. The only reason he could still stand there was because he had been taking shadowed heaven pills all year round, tempering his physique and enriching his vitality. But that was it. Ming Yu stared blankly at Yang Kai, a look of unwillingness on his face as he clenched something in his hand. Yang Kai's gaze shifted as he saw what this thing was. It turned out to be a token, one that Yang Kai felt was very familiar. From this token, he could clearly feel an emperor pressure. A Star Emperor token. Yang Kai raised his brow. He had never expected that Ming Yu would possess a Star Emperor token. Under Yang Kai's perception, it was because of this Star Emperor token that Ming Yu was able to communicate with the world energy of Serene Soul Island and mobilize his own Saint Qi and Shi, allowing him to persist under the fierce attack of the Firebird until now. This damned place is actually related to Yang inflammation. This thought quickly flashed across Yang Kai's mind. No longer hesitating, Yang Kai's figure flickered, rushed in front of Ming Yu, and sent out a palm strike towards him. Ming Yu was already an arrow at the end of its flight and was unable to resist, so this palm strike was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Ming Yu could only watch as Yang Kai's palm struck him, unable to resist. With a muffled thud, Ming Yu fell backwards. Yang Kai reacted quickly and took the Star Emperor token and space ring from Ming Yu's hand. With his back to Shaw Hu and the others, Yang Kai carefully stroked this Star Emperor token and soon determined that it was indeed a Star Emperor token, because the ones he had were exactly the same as this one in front of him. Using his divine sense, Yang Kai found that this Star Emperor token seemed to have some subtle connection to a certain location on Serene Soul Island. Yang Kai raised his head and stared in that direction. "Old Shaw, I'll leave the rest to you, I'll go over there and investigate," Yang Kai said before immediately disappearing. Shaw who was stunned for a moment but didn't care too much about this, instead turning his head and grinning towards Ming Yu's subordinates. It was not until this moment that these people came back to their senses and cried out in panic, "Island Master Shaw, please spare us. What happened 100 years ago was Ming Yu who forced us, we did not do it willingly." "Heh, willingly or not, it has nothing to do with this old master. Every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. You all colluded with that bastard Ming Yu 100 years ago to make things difficult for this old master. If this old master hadn't been so lucky, I'm afraid he wouldn't have been able to get his revenge today." Shaw whose body flashed a bright red light as he rushed towards the cultivator like a tiger in a flock of sheep, none of them able to withstand a single blow, and after 10 breaths of time, all of them were slain. Now that he had gotten his revenge, Shaw who stood in place and let out a thunderous roar towards the heavens that rolled out in all directions. The thousands of cultivators on Serene Soul Island all turned their eyes towards the source of this roar, their expressions changing slightly. They knew that Serene Soul Island had undergone a great change. In a small valley near the center of Serene Soul Island, Yang Kai stepped inside. Since entering this place, the Star Emperor token in his hand, which originally belonged to Mingyu, buzzed, as if it was trying to break free from Yang Kai's control. The scenery in this valley was quite good, and there were a few cottages built around it. Yang Kai didn't know whose residence it was, but it was now empty. Kai Yang turned his head and looked around, a look of suspicion on his face. Although he felt that this valley was a little strange, he couldn't tell what it was based on his observation alone. After thinking about it for a moment, Yang Kai released the suppression on the Star Emperor token in his hand. The Star Emperor token immediately flew out, drawing a beautiful arc in the air, and as the Star Emperor token danced in the air, a series of dark holes suddenly appeared. These holes were filled with nothingness and chaos, and rich space force fluctuations pulsed from them. Yang Kai's expression suddenly became solemn. Chapter 1716. These holes were all similar to void cracks, and they had always existed here. It was just that no one had noticed them, and only Star Emperor tokens could activate them. The shapes of these holes were also similar to Star Emperor tokens. In the void, there were a total of 9 holes, each of which had some subtle and mysterious connections. These 9 token-shaped holes were connected from head to tail and formed an array that Yang Kai could not understand. 9 was an extreme number, and Yang Inflammation had once told Yang Kai that in her heyday, she had made a total of 9 Star Emperor tokens. If all 9 Star Emperor tokens could be collected, a shocking secret would be revealed. As for what this shocking secret was, Yang Inflammation had not explained. However, it was obviously related to the scene in front of him. Yang Kai wore a thoughtful look as he gradually connected the dots between what he had seen and heard in the past, but he was still unable to speculate on Yang Inflammation's intentions. Serene Soul Island was definitely related to Yang Inflammation, there was no doubt about this. Otherwise, there would not be 9 token-shaped void cracks here, nor would there be a similar number of holes as the total number of Star Emperor tokens. Just as Yang Kai was in a daze, the Star Emperor token flew into one of the holes, perfectly covering it, leaving no gap, as if the void crack had been filled by the Star Emperor token. After a moment of contemplation, Yang Kai flipped his wrist and summoned 4 more Star Emperor tokens into his palm. These 4 Star Emperor tokens were obtained by Yang Kai by chance over the past few dozen years after entering Star territory. One of them was given to him by Gui Zhu and was the only Star Emperor token that sealed the divine technique of the Great Emperors. However, during his battle with Luo Hai on Scarlet Wave Star, Yang Kai had unlocked the seal and used the power of the Star Emperor token to kill Luo Hai. Although the seal was gone, the Star Emperor token had been preserved. The second was obtained by Yang Kai when he first entered Liu Yang Sand Field for life experience. The third was originally Yi Shiyun's, but it later fell into Yang Kai's hands. The fourth piece was obtained from the Star King Mountain's altar. Including the Star Emperor token he had obtained today, Kai Yang already had a total of 5 pieces in his hands. Of the remaining 4 pieces, Yang Kai only knew that Hung Luo Chamber of Commerce had one while the whereabouts of the other 3 were unknown. After the 4 Star Emperor tokens were taken out, the same thing happened. They wanted to escape from Yang Kai's control, but Yang Kai remained calm and collected, allowing them to fly away. Unsurprisingly, after the 4 Star Emperor tokens arced through the air, they each embedded themselves into the void, filling up the holes that had been left behind. In the next moment, the 5 Star Emperor tokens bloomed with light and a mysterious power emerged from the Star Emperor tokens and enveloped Yang Kai. His Saint Chi, which had been dormant for a long time, burst like a dam. It rumbled and flowed through Yang Kai's flesh and meridians, emitting an astonishing power. After experiencing this long-awaited power, Yang Kai took a deep breath and felt refreshed. By now, he had finally figured out what had happened. It was precisely because he had a Star Emperor token that Mingyu was able to use his Saint Chi to take Shohu by surprise. Just like he was now. Yang Kai didn't know if Mingyu originally had a Star Emperor token or if he had accidentally discovered it here. Mingyu was dead, so there was no way to investigate this matter. Yang Kai stood in place like a javelin. Raising his eyes, he stared into the void with a deep gaze. His consciousness passed through the void and probed far into the distance. He could faintly sense that there was an even vaster world hidden behind this void. This world was far more wonderful than the star territory he was in, and there was an even more powerful cultivator there. An even more terrifying principal strength. Yang Kai's consciousness wandered and he was unable to wake up for a long time. He wanted to see what this world was like, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not see it clearly. All Yang Kai could vaguely feel was that his soul was constantly moving forward, as if there was no end to it. Outside the mountain pass, Shohu crossed his hands behind his back and looked forward quietly. He didn't know why Yang Kai had entered that place, but it had been a month since he entered. Serene Soul Island was now under his complete control, and all the cultivator who had targeted him in the past had been killed. The remaining cultivator had also pledged loyalty to him. Shohu had once again become the island master of Serene Soul Island. Pang Zhan, Qian Mo, and Shong Ao arrived together. Shong Ao had not died, he had just been imprisoned by Mingyu and had suffered some torture. Without taking Shadowed Heaven pills, Shong Ao was able to display extraordinary combat power, so it was easy to imagine how strong he would be if he had taken Shadowed Heaven pills. With such potential, Mingyu was naturally reluctant to kill him. His original intention was to imprison him for a period of time to temper his temperament and then find a way to subdue him, but in the end, that day had not come. After Mingyu's death, Shong Ao was rescued by Qian Mo. At this moment, as the three of them approached, at the entrance of the mountain pass, the stone mongoose carrying the heaven-shaking pillar on his shoulder and the beautiful artifact spirit Liu Yang in human form stared at them vigilantly. The three of them were instantly locked onto by the divine senses of the stone mongoose and Liu Yang, and all of them went stiff, not daring to move. Both of you, they mean no harm, there's no need to be nervous, Shohu's mouth twitched as he hurriedly cupped his fists. The stone mongoose rolled its eyes but remained unmoved, still leaning forward and maintaining an attacking posture. Liu Yang, on the other hand, was more intelligent and glanced at Shohu coldly before withdrawing her hostility. Shohu couldn't help sweating slightly. Thinking back, he was one of the top masters on the limitless ocean and had been trapped on Serene Soul Island for 300 years. Although he had not been able to use his Saint Chi, after tempering his body with Shadowed Heaven pills, Shohu believed he was no weaker than before. Even so, he was still no match for these two subordinates of Yang Kai. Needless to say, the stone mongoose was obviously a powerful monster. Without being able to use his Saint Chi, even 10 Shohu together might not be able to compete with it. The gorgeous woman was even more powerful, the violent power of thunder and fire flowing through her body giving her an imposing aura that put even more pressure on Shohu than the stone mongoose. Facing this woman, Shohu felt like he was facing an Origin King, although he did not know how strong an Origin King was. After comforting the stone mongoose and Liu Yang, Shohu turned his head to Pang Zhan and asked, "What's the matter?" Shong Ao and Commander Qian Mo wanted to come over and thank Sect Master Yang. Pang Zhan replied respectfully, "Of course." Shohu nodded before turning to Qian Mo and Shong Ao and smiling bitterly, "But I'm afraid that won't be possible now. As you can see, no one can pass through here. You can only wait for Yang Kai to come out on his own." "We'll just wait," Shong Ao coldly snorted. After learning that it was basically Yang Kai's credit that allowed him to escape this time, Shong Ao wanted to thank him in person. As for Shohu, who had also contributed a lot, Shong Ao did not put him in his eyes. The grievances between Sea Temple and Sea God Palace ran deep and were not something that could be easily resolved overnight. Shohu obviously knew this as well. However, he did not care about Shong Ao's indifference and instead asked with interest, "By the way, this old master has been busy with Serene Soul Island these days and has not had time to ask about it in detail. Pang Zhan, what is the background of Yang Kai?" Hearing this question, Shong Ao and Qian Mo could not help showing a look of interest. The strong always respected those who were stronger. Qian Mo and Shong Ao were both commander-level characters in the Sea Clan, possessing high status and great strength. However, compared with Yang Kai, the two of them found that they were simply not worthy of his attention. Having lived in the deep sea for so long, they did not know much about inland matters, even less than Pang Zhan, so they were naturally curious about Yang Kai's origins. Sect Master Yang is the sect master of High Heaven Sec. Pang Zhan thought for a moment. he replied with a serious expression. High Heaven Sect. Shahu was stunned. How come this old master has never heard of this sect? Pang Zhen smiled bitterly. Martial uncle disappeared 300 years ago, so naturally it's impossible for you to have heard of it. This High Heaven Sect has only been around for 15 years. 15 years, its heritage isn't that deep. Shahu chuckled. However, with a capable person like Yang Kai, as long as it is given time, it will definitely be able to rival Heaven Battling Union. Thunder Typhoon Sect will be on equal footing. Martial uncle. Pang Zhen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Thunder Typhoon Sect and Heaven Battling Union are already history. They were destroyed. Shahu's expression shook as he exclaimed. It was destroyed by Sect Master Yang's High Heaven Sect. Shahu sucked in a breath of cold air while Qian Mo and Shong Ao looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Qian Mo and Shong Ao didn't know much about the situation on the mainland. However, they had all heard of the names of Thunder Typhoon Sect and Heaven Battling Union. These were great forces that had dominated Shadowed Star for thousands of years. The Star King Mountain was also destroyed by him. Pang Zhen threw out another shocking piece of news. What? This time, Shahu was thoroughly shocked. Even Star Emperor Mountain was destroyed by him? Not exactly, because most of Star Emperor Mountain's masters have been recruited to High Heaven Sect by Sect Master Yang. Currently, High Heaven Sect is the strongest sect on Shadowed Star. How does my sea palace compare? Shahu asked anxiously. I'm afraid it's not enough. Pang Zhen said truthfully. However, because we are separated from High Heaven Sect by the deep sea and inland respectively, there is no intersection. On top of that, High Heaven Sect's headquarters is located inside the Flowing Flame Sandfield. It can be said to be an impregnable fortress that no one can breach. Shahu was instantly stunned. He naturally knew about the Liu Yang Sandfield. It was one of Shadowed Star's restricted areas, one that no one could enter under normal circumstances, but High Heaven Sect had actually established its headquarters there. How did they accomplish this? Not only was Shahu dumbfounded, but Qian Mo and Shong Ao were also dumbfounded, unable to believe their eyes. Pang Zhen tactfully did not say anything more as he could understand the shock in the hearts of Shahu and the two Sea Clan commanders. Which master on Shadowed Star had not been shocked when they heard this news? When this information was passed to the Deep Sea, Sea Temple was also completely shocked, and the several temple masters were unable to eat or sleep, fearing that Yang Kai's ambitions would soar and he would extend his claws to the limitless ocean. But it turned out that Yang Kai had no such intentions, and after several years, the several temple masters of Sea Temple gradually calmed down. A few days ago, when Yang Kai was on Sunrise Island, he proposed to trade with Sea Temple. It was likely that the several temple masters did not understand Yang Kai's intentions, so they had not agreed. Chapter 1717. After a long silence, Shahu seemed to have gradually digested this information and asked more carefully about Yang Kai. Pang Zhen told him all the information he knew. Shahu's expression became more and more dignified while Qian Mo and Shong Ao's expressions also changed, seemingly communicating with each other secretly. At that moment, there was a sudden movement in the mountain col and a figure walked out. It was Yang Kai. Shong Ao, Qian Mo, and Pang Zhen all looked shocked and cupped their fists. Shahu smiled slightly and asked, "Did you gain anything?" Yang Kai returned the courtesy before putting away the stone mongoose and Liu Yang before nodding, "A little." "So, you can also use your Saint Qi?" Shahu asked in surprise. In his battle with Ming Yu that day, his opponent had suddenly used his Saint Qi and Sure, which had really startled Shahu. After thinking about it for a while, Shahu could only attribute this to the secret hidden in this mountain kernel. The depths of this mountain col were the place he had told Yang Kai before, a place even he could not explore. There must be some secrets hidden there, perhaps related to why Ming Yu was able to use his Saint Qi, but Shahu could not figure out why. Now that he saw Yang Kai's expression, he immediately had a guess. Using Saint Qi is no problem. Yang Kai nodded lightly, not as happy as Shahu imagined, quickly adding, "I also found a way to leave this place." "What?" Shahu exclaimed. Pang Zhan and the other two were also stunned for a moment before immediately turning overjoyed looks towards Yang Kai. Eagerly, they asked, "Is that true?" Naturally, Yang Kai nodded. "I came out to tell you this news. If any of you want to go out with me, make preparations as soon as possible. I will be leaving this place in a few days." Sect Master Yang. Pang Zhan looked at Yang Kai hesitantly. "Dare I ask, Sect Master Yang, how many people can you take out?" To the side, Shong Ao heard Pang Zhan's question and immediately came to his senses and asked the same question. "It won't be a problem to bring everyone out," Yang Kai replied. "However, but what?" Pang Zhan immediately tensed up. "I can take the people of Supreme Ocean Palace and Sea God's Palace out for free. As for the others, Ian, I'll have to trouble you to tell those people that if they want to leave this place, they should help me find some shady heaven lotuses." Pang Zhan was startled, but he quickly reacted and smiled bitterly. Sect Master Yang's calculations are quite good. One could imagine. Once news of this spread, the cultivator who had been trapped on Serene Soul Island would definitely work hard to find the shadowed heaven lotus in order to leave this place. At that time, Yang Kai would become the biggest winner. Yang Kai chuckled and said, "I'm just collecting a little reward." "What about the time?" "Yang Kai, when do you plan to leave?" Shohu asked. "In a month." "Good." Shohu nodded. "This old master will help you pass on the message. As for my Ocean Palace's cultivator, I won't let you work for nothing. Once we leave this place, Ocean Palace will naturally send you a gift of thanks. If old Shaw insists, then it would be impolite for me to refuse." Yang Kai laughed. "My Sea God Palace will not let Sect Master Yang work for nothing," Shong Ao quickly expressed. Yang Kai glanced at him. He just nodded faintly and did not say anything. The news of being able to leave Serene Soul Island spread like wildfire. Soon, it swept across all of Serene Soul Island. After hearing this news, more than 90% of the cultivator expressed their disbelief, thinking it was some kind of joke. After all, if there really was a way to leave Serene Soul Island, they wouldn't have been trapped here for so many years. Over the years, countless cultivator had been trapped on Serene Soul Island, many of whom were incredibly talented, so there should be some cultivator who could find a way to leave. But in fact, Shadowed Soul Island was nothing more than a cage that trapped everyone here until they died. Now that such a piece of news had suddenly popped up, it was really hard to believe. It wasn't until Shaw who stepped forward to clarify and vouch for them that the Serene Soul Island cultivator believed the authenticity of this news. For a time, almost all of Serene Soul Island's cultivator mobilized and began to set off in groups to the surrounding sea territory in search of shadowed heaven lotuses, hoping to occupy a spot to leave. Serene Soul Island became an empty island in a very short time. Thousands of kilometers away from Serene Soul Island, in the sea territory, Yang Kai stood on the back of the little dolphin and set off forward. While the Serene Soul Island cultivator was searching for shadowed heaven lotuses, Yang Kai himself had not been idle. Shadowed heaven lotuses were such good things that the more the better, so after Shaw who spread the news that day, Yang Kai left Serene Soul Island with the little dolphin and set off to the distant sea territory, relying on the little dolphin's instincts to search for precious shadowed heaven lotuses. Yang Kai's harvest was bountiful. The distant sea had always been a difficult place for Serene Soul Island cultivator to set foot in, so naturally, there were more shadowed heaven lotuses here than near the coast. After tempering his body with hundreds of origin-grade shadowed heaven pills, Yang Kai's physique had become several times stronger than when he first entered Serene Soul Island. The sea beasts he used to think were powerful were now vulnerable in front of him. The further Yang Kai and the little dolphin traveled, the more abundant their harvest became. Estimating that it was about time, Yang Kai had the little dolphin return. When he returned to Serene Soul Island again, thousands of cultivators were already waiting for him. A month was not enough time for all the cultivators to harvest enough shadowed heaven lotuses. Some of them were unlucky and did not even see a single shadowed heaven lotus. At this moment, all of them looked uneasy, worried that Yang Kai would not take them with him when he left. After meeting with Shaw Hu and the others and learning about the situation, Yang Kai asked the cultivators of Sea Temple and Sea God Palace to help him collect the shadowed heaven lotuses. The cultivator who had a shadowed heaven lotus happily handed over his harvest this month before walking to the side and waiting for the moment to leave. It only took a day for the matter to be settled. The island's residents were divided into two groups, one group who had turned in their shadowed heaven lotuses and the other group who had not. The number of cultivators who had not turned in their shadowed heaven lotuses was not too many, only 700 to 800. Yang Kai stood in front of these 700 to 800 people and looked at the anxiety, uneasiness, and embarrassment on their faces before smiling and saying loudly, "Don't say this Yang didn't give you a chance. Since you don't have any shadowed heaven lotuses, you can only use other methods to redeem your freedom. Little brother, may I ask what kind of method it is?" In the crowd, a warrior who looked a little old asked. Everyone else also looked at Yang Kai curiously, lest he make some harsh demands. Some of you may have great backgrounds, or your status on Shadowed Star may not be low. You must have relatives and sects on Shadowed Star, so after leaving here, as long as you pay the appropriate price, I can take you with me. If you can't even afford this price, then you will be my slaves for 10 years. For 10 years, your lives will be mine, and you will do whatever I tell you to do. As soon as these words came out, the audience went into an uproar. Some of the cultivators were worried, but most of the cultivators were overjoyed. Yang Kai was right. Most of these people had relatives and sects on Shadowed Star, so as long as they left here, it would not be a problem to collect some materials. Exchanging those materials for their freedom was not a bad deal. If they couldn't even raise such a small amount of materials, 10 years of servitude wouldn't be a problem. Yang Kai didn't seem to be an evil person, otherwise, he wouldn't have made such a suggestion. All he needed to do was sit back and abandon them on Shadowed Soul Island. 10 years later, they would regain their freedom. Those who are willing, please go to Island Master Shaw and leave your soul imprint. After you complete the agreement, this Yang will return your soul imprint. Yang Kai shouted again. In the next moment, more than half of these 700 to 800 people rushed in Shaw Hu's direction, while the rest hesitated for a moment before following after them, seemingly resigned to their fate. On the other side, Shaw Hu, who had received instructions from Yang Kai in advance, had already ordered the disciples of Sea Temple to prepare. After these cultivators rushed up, Shaw Hu took out a piece of white spirit jade and had each cultivator engrave their soul imprints on it. With these soul imprints, anyone could easily control the life or death of these cultivators, so no one would dare ignore today's agreement. Shaw Hu squeezed out of the crowd and came to Yang Kai's side. Looking around at the crowd, he smiled bitterly and said, "Does Sect Master Yang's High Heaven sect lack such materials?" Yang Kai chuckled, "Mosquito meat is still meat." Shaw Hu glanced at him thoughtfully for a moment before chuckling meaningfully but did not say anything more. He seemed to have seen through Yang Kai's intentions. Yang Kai clearly intended to take away all the cultivators on Serene Soul Island, which was why he made such a simple request. Yang Kai had two purposes for doing this. On the one hand, he wanted to use the cultivator on the island to help him plunder Shadowed Heaven Lotus, and on the other hand, he wanted to make a clean bowl of water so he would not be criticized. The only explanation for this was that he could return to Serene Soul Island and had already regarded this place as his own backyard, so he wanted to take everyone away. Considering all this, Shaw Hu's breathing quickened slightly. Not to mention the number of Shadowed Heaven Lotus Yang Kai had harvested on Serene Soul Island these days. In the future, as long as he wanted, he could come here to collect Shadowed Heaven Lotus at any time. It was easy to imagine what a terrifying behemoth High Heaven sect would become in the future. Yang Kai did not know what Shaw Hu was thinking, but with age and experience, Yang Kai believed that Shaw Hu could vaguely guess what he was thinking. Yang Kai had no intention of explaining himself. Now that he had the method to leave, he had the right and ability to do so. He just wanted to treat this place as his own restricted area. The matter of the 700 to 800 cultivators was settled in less than a stick of incense worth of time, and all the cultivators on Serene Soul Island had been assembled. Everyone's eyes turned to Yang Kai, wondering what method he would use to take them away from this place, a look of expectation and anxiety appearing on everyone's faces. Even Shaw Hu and the others were the same. Although Yang Kai had spoken confidently before and none of them had the slightest doubt, when it came to this, they could not help feeling nervous. Chapter 17:18. In front of everyone's eyes, Yang Kai didn't move much, simply closing his eyes and standing quietly in place. However, a pure and rich spiritual energy spread out from his body. The strength of this spiritual energy caused everyone to pale in shock. Yang Kai's spiritual energy penetrated the void and extended to an unknown location. Yang Kai had mastered the Tao of space, and tearing space was always the best way to escape from a prison, but this method wasn't suitable for Serene Soul Island. This strange place was isolated from the outside world, so if Yang Kai couldn't locate Shadowed Star, even if he used tearing space, he would only be able to travel inside Serene Soul Island, unable to leave. However, with some of the secrets of Serene Soul Island and the ability to use Saint Chi, as well as being Shadowed Star's Star Master, it wasn't too difficult for Yang Kai to determine the location of Shadowed Star. Yang Kai's divine sense shuttled through the void and soon sensed the space barrier between Serene Soul Island and Shadowed Star. Opening his eyes, Yang Kai's space force fluctuated wildly as he stretched out his hands and thrust them forward. His hands shot out like dragons emerging from the sea and, under everyone's close attention, plunged directly into the void. Exclamations suddenly rang out as the thousands of cultivators stared with wide eyes at this incredible scene. What they saw was Yang Kai's two arms strangely disappearing. Such a scene was beyond the scope of their understanding. In the next moment, Yang Kai suddenly let out a roar. His arms suddenly tore to the sides, and along with his movements. The space in front of him was like a piece of cloth being torn in half. A dark crack appeared. The crack grew larger and larger, and a terrifying aura spread out from it, like an ancient beast opening its bloody maw, wanting to swallow this world whole. It wasn't until this crack expanded to about 10 meters in length that Yang Kai took a deep breath and stopped tearing. However, the rich spatial energy was still surging out of Yang Kai's body. Like a sharp arrow, Yang Kai shot into the void and opened up a void corridor that connected Serene Soul Island to a certain place on Shadowed Star. Shaw, who was already dumbfounded. A month ago, Yang Kai had said that he had mastered the method to leave, but Shaw, who did not doubt it. However, he didn't know the inside story. Only now did he truly understand what Yang Kai was relying on. He had actually cultivated the extremely rare secret art of space, and had mastered it to such a level. Not only could he tear space apart with his own strength, but he could also construct a safe void corridor. This ability could be seen throughout the entire planet's territory. Shaw, who believed that even the legendary Origin King Realm Masters could not achieve what Yang Kai had done. If we don't leave now, when should we? Just as Shaw, who was lost in thought, Yang Kai's voice suddenly reached his ears. He suddenly came back to his senses and waved his hand. Shouting, he shouted, "Follow this old master." Saying so, he was the first to rush into the void corridor constructed by Yang Kai and was swallowed by the darkness and nothingness. The Sea Temple disciples followed closely behind, disappearing one after another. The Sea Clan masters also hurried to keep up. Qian Mo nodded slightly to Yang Kai when she passed by him while the little dolphin flicked her tail and made a series of strange sounds to Yang Kai, seemingly urging him to follow quickly. After the cultivator from Sea Temple and Sea God Palace disappeared, the other cultivators rushed forward. The void corridor torn by Yang Kai was 10 meters long, enough to accommodate many people walking side by side, so even if there were thousands of cultivators waiting, their speed was still extremely fast. In less than half a cup of tea's time, only Yang Kai remained on Serene Soul Island. Looking around, after confirming that there was no one left alive, Yang Kai was the last to rush into the void corridor. This void corridor was constructed by him personally, so Yang Kai was more familiar with its direction than anyone else. Allowing himself to swim freely through the void, after what seemed like an eternity, Yang Kai's vision blurred and he soon arrived above a sea territory. A sea breeze with a unique fishy smell brushed past Yang Kai's face as the cries and shouts of countless cultivators filled his ears. These were the cultivators who had just escaped from Serene Soul Island and were venting their excitement. From the moment they were trapped on Serene Soul Island, they thought they would never be able to leave again in this life and would only be able to live out the rest of their lives under the pressure of Mingyu. Never had they imagined that they would one day return to Shadowed Star. As such, after Yang Kai appeared, many cultivators cast grateful glances towards him. Regardless of whether Yang Kai had collected a certain amount of remuneration from them or not, the fact that they had left Serene Soul Island was real, and everyone was excited to see the light of day again. Yang Kai. Shaw flew over and could not help breathing a sigh of relief when he saw that Yang Kai was safe. Yang Kai nodded lightly before turning around and waving his hand towards the void crack behind him. The void crack, which looked like a beast's maw, began to collapse and soon disappeared. Without this void crack and the void corridor, no one could use Yang Kai's achievements to return to Serene Soul Island. Where is this place? Are we still on the limitless ocean? Yang Kai asked. Pang Zhen and the Sea Clan's people have already gone to investigate. News will come back soon, Shaw replied. Yang Kai nodded and waited quietly. About an hour later, Pang Zhen and Qian Mo appeared in front of everyone with joyful expressions on their faces. Martial uncle, this is indeed the limitless ocean. 10,000 kilometers west of here is my sea temple's headquarters, Black Reef Island. Pang Zhen reported excitedly. That's good news. Shaw also showed a smile on his face. After 300 years, this old master has finally returned home. Yang Kai, this old master must thank you. Yang Kai grinned meaningfully. Old Shaw is too polite. If you really want to thank me, you might as well promise me one thing. Speak, as long as you don't force this old master to betray his sect, this old master can promise you anything, Shaw said straightforwardly. Yang Kai's expression changed slightly as he smiled and said, it's not a big deal, it's just that my High Heaven sect wants to make some material transactions with Sea Temple. After all, the products produced inland are very different from those produced in the deep sea. I mentioned this to Island Master Pang last time. However, Sea Temple seems to lack interest and hasn't responded yet. Pang Zhen couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. This old master thought it was something big, but for such a trivial matter, this old master has agreed. On top of that, such a transaction is beneficial to all of us, so Sea Temple will not refuse. When this old master returns to headquarters, he will personally preside over it. Many thanks, old Shaw. Yang Kai smiled slightly. Shaw was the previous second temple master of Sea Temple. Although he had disappeared for nearly 300 years, his prestige and seniority were still there, so since he had agreed, there shouldn't be any problems. Sect Master Yang, I wonder if my Sea God Palace can participate in this matter? Qian Mo suddenly asked with a smile. You also want to participate? Yang Kai looked at Qian Mo in amazement. Naturally. My Sea God Palace's control over deep-sea materials is even stronger than Sea Temple's, so Sect Master Yang is willing to make these transactions with Sea Temple. There is no reason to refuse my Sea God Palace's offer, right? Of course we won't refuse. Great Commander Qian Mo saying so is my High Heaven sect's greatest pleasure, Yang Kai laughed. Then it's settled, but the distance between the inland and the deep sea is far, so I'm afraid the transportation of materials will be quite troublesome. Shaw also nodded lightly to the side, agreeing with Qian Mo's statement. The reason why the deep sea and inland materials could not be exchanged on a large scale was because of the distance between them, something the cultivators on Shadowed Star could not solve. You don't need to worry about this. I will arrange a space array to connect High Heaven sect with your two sects. When the time comes, distance will not be a problem. Yang Kai already had a solution to this problem. Both Qian Mo and Shaw eyes lit up, but then they remembered Yang Kai's ability to tear space. Both of them firmly believed in his ability to arrange a space array. If that's the case, this great commander will wait for Sect Master Yang's good news. Qian Mo smiled. This old master will also wait for your good news, Shaw said. While everyone was talking, many cultivators had already left. The people from Sea Temple and Sea God Palace briefly discussed before bidding farewell to Yang Kai and returning to their respective headquarters. The little dolphin was reluctant to part with Yang Kai, seemingly unwilling to leave. In the end, Yang Kai gave it a few bottles of Shadowed Heaven pills to calm its mood. After an hour, only the 700 to 800 cultivators who had been slaves for 10 years remained, all of them looking at Yang Kai eagerly, waiting for his orders. Go to High Heaven sect yourselves. After you arrive, someone will receive you. If you need to contact your family or sect, feel free to do so. As long as you gather enough materials, this sect master will return your freedom, Yang Kai said. Many thanks, Sect Master Yang. The hundreds of cultivators cupped their fists. Yang Kai nodded and did not say anything more, his figure flickering and disappearing directly from where he stood. After returning to Shadowed Star, he could once again dominate this world with all the conveniences of a Star Master. Every time he moved, he could cross a distance of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of kilometers. It took less than half an hour for Yang Kai to arrive at the periphery of the Liuyang Desert. Looking at this familiar scene, Yang Kai smiled slightly. No matter how wonderful the outside world was, when one's mind and body were exhausted, it was always best to be at home. Yang Kai disappeared again, and when he reappeared, he was already inside High Heaven Sect. Without disturbing too many people, Yang Kai first went to visit his parents to reassure them before going to see the elders of High Heaven Sect to ask about the situation on Shadowed Star during the months he had been gone. Corpse Spirit religion had basically been wiped out, and about half of the great forces on Shadowed Star's mainland were in a state of ruin. High Heaven Sect, on the other hand, had become the symbol of Shadowed Star in the truest sense after this battle, becoming one of the most powerful sects on Shadowed Star. If not for the fact that Qian Tong of Shadow Moon Hall was an Origin King Realm Master, this title could be removed. With an Origin King presiding over Shadow Moon Hall, it was indeed on equal footing with High Heaven Sect. In addition, there were already many great forces and families on Shadowed Star who intended to form an alliance with High Heaven Sect and follow its lead. Yi Shiyun took the initiative to agree. It could be said that the current High Heaven Sect had already surpassed Star Emperor Mountain in terms of strength and prestige. Chapter 1719. With Yi Shiyun presiding over the overall situation of High Heaven Sect, there was no need for Yang Kai to spend any effort. Even if Yang Kai was not present, everything would be handled properly. After separating from the elders, Yang Kai went to see his little senior sister. During this trip to Serene Soul Island, Yang Kai's biggest harvest was naturally the thousands of shadowed heaven lotuses of different colors. With so many shadowed heaven lotuses, even if Yang Kai personally refined them, it would take him a long time to refine them all. However, for Xia Ningchang, time was not a problem. She could use alchemy to cultivate. The shadowed heaven lotus and the shadowed heaven pill couldn't be found in the outside world, so Xia Ningchang was very interested in them. After getting all the herbs and pill recipes, she immediately went into seclusion and concentrated on refining the pills. Yang Kai believed that soon, High Heaven Sect would have a large number of shadowed heaven pills, and with these body-tempering pills, the overall strength of High Heaven Sect would undoubtedly rise to another level. Yang Kai also had his own plans for these shadowed heaven pills that were about to come out. Although 10,000 shadowed heaven lotuses seemed like a huge number, if they were refined into pills, they would only yield between 70,000 and 80,000 pills at most. Now that High Heaven Sect had over 10,000 disciples, these 70,000 to 80,000 pills naturally could not be divided equally between everyone. In addition to the Origin returning realm masters who were eligible to receive a certain number of shadowed heaven pills for body tempering, Yang Kai intended to take out a portion of the shadowed heaven pills as rewards for ordinary disciples who had contributed to High Heaven Sect. Of course, this was just Yang Kai's idea. If he wanted to implement it, he would need to wait for some time. Moreover, he did not intend to handle this matter himself and intended to leave it all to Yi Shiyun. After leaving Pill King Peak where Xia Ningchang was staying, Yang Kai went straight to the 6th layer of the Liuyang sandfield, the place where Yang Inflammation was hibernating. Entering the loft and arriving on the 2nd floor, Yang Inflammation sensed his presence and pulled his soul avatar into his knowledge sea. Just like the last time they met, the two soul avatars sat cross-legged opposite each other while Yang Inflammation roared and roared below. Yang Kai's knowledge sea was burning hot. I heard Yi Shiyun say that you went to hunt down the Insect Emperor. What happened? Yang Inflammation asked. I am the soul avatar, Yang Kai. To be honest with you, Yang Kai smiled meaningfully. It looks like he's dead. Yang Yang gently nodded before sighing slightly. The Insect Emperor was also a hero. I never thought that he would die at your hands in the end. If his enemies knew about this, I'm afraid they wouldn't believe it. Yonkai didn't care. No matter how powerful the insect emperor was, that was a matter from tens of thousands of years ago. Back then, his cultivation had fallen so much that he wasn't even an origin king, and when he fought with Yonkai on Shadowed Star, there was no way he could have survived. However, the biggest reason Yonkai was able to kill the insect emperor this time was because of Yonkai. If not for the fact that Yang Inflammation had given Shadowed Star's source to Yonkai, with Yonkai's current abilities, he would not have been able to kill the insect emperor. Yonkai's ability to escape was truly amazing. Even if an ordinary origin king wanted to hunt him down, they would not be able to do so. Even an ordinary origin king would be at a loss. Your harvest wasn't small? Yang Inflammation pursed his lips and smiled. There were many good things on the insect emperor. I didn't see anything good, only a soul-splitting saber and a bracelet-like artifact. The soul-splitting saber and the bracelet-like artifact were both emperor artifacts. Like the Annihilation Thunder Bead, the Sealed World Bead, and the 3 blazing flame rings, Yonkai roughly understood the function of the soul-splitting saber. Its power was unfathomable, but unfortunately, the grade of this emperor artifact was too high for Yonkai to use, so he could only temporarily refine it and hope that one day he could use it. As for the bracelet-like artifact, Yonkai was confused. He couldn't even figure out what it was used for. Insect enslavement bracelet? Yang Inflammation raised her brow and pointed out the name of this artifact. That thing is called the insect enslavement bracelet. Yonkai was surprised. The artifacts on the insect emperor's hands are all famous, and needless to say, the soul-splitting saber. The insect enslavement bracelet is the foundation of his foothold. Oh, what's the use of this thing? Tell me about it. Yonkai suddenly became interested. The insect enslavement bracelet is very useful. Yang Inflammation pursed her lips and smiled, not to mention that this artifact can naturally restrain exotic insects. It even has some deterrent effect on some smaller monster beast. Just the little creatures raised by the insect emperor inside the insect enslavement bracelet, once released, can easily destroy an entire star's territory. Yonkai's expression became dignified as he asked in amazement, "There are other things in the insect enslavement bracelet?" Yang Inflammation giggled, "Then where do you think the insect emperor is raising his little creatures? It's not like he's raising them on himself, right? The insect enslavement bracelet is where he keeps the exotic insects. The insect emperor has hundreds of extinct exotic insects in his hands. Each of them is extremely ferocious, and each of them has a different use. Back then, I suffered quite a bit from the insect enslavement bracelet." The more Yonkai listened, the brighter his eyes became, as if he had discovered a shocking secret. "Are you interested?" Yang Inflammation teased. "To be honest, a little." Yonkai gradually restrained his excitement, "But I still think that cultivation should be based on people. This kind of insect enslavement bracelet can only be used as a supplement. If I really spend my time on it, I'm afraid it will be a waste." Yang Inflammation slowly shook her head. "There are 3,000 grand DAOs, and insect enslavement is one of them. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the insect emperor to achieve what he did back then. It can only be said that your DAO is different from the insect emperor's." "Different DAO?" Yonkai pondered. Yang Inflammation chuckled, "It's still too early for you. You should break through to the Origin King realm as soon as possible. After reaching the Origin King realm, you will be able to see more and further." "Above the Origin King realm, is there a higher realm?" Yonkai suddenly asked. "Naturally there is. What about you?" Yonkai stared at Yang Inflammation with scorching eyes. "I have already surpassed that realm." Yang Inflammation replied lightly. Yonkai fell silent. From the information revealed by Yang Inflammation, it was not difficult for him to infer that there was indeed a higher realm above the Origin King realm. And above this higher realm, there were stronger existences, Yang Inflammation being one of them. Before he knew this information, Yonkai didn't think much of it, but after learning about it, he felt like he was standing at the bottom of a mountain, looking up at the towering mountain, surrounded by clouds and mist, making it impossible to see the scenery in front of him. The road ahead was endless, and there was no peak in the martial Dao. Yang Inflammation didn't speak anymore and instead observed Yang Kai's reaction. He found that Yang Kai didn't seem to have suffered any blow because of this. Instead, after a moment of silence, Yang Kai let out a sigh of relief and his expression became relaxed. His eyes, which were like burning flames, showed the drive deep in his heart. Yang Inflammation pursed his lips and smiled, praising, "Your mentality is very good." Yang Kai nodded, "I've been cultivating for several dozen years now, climbing from the bottom step to the top step by step. Now, I can be considered to have some small achievements. Even if the road ahead is filled with thorns and obstacles, I can only continue climbing. Sooner or later, I will be able to stand as high as you and see as far as you." Yang Yang covered her red lips with her small hand as a smile appeared on her face. "Can I say you're worth teaching?" "Up to you." Yang Kai shrugged his shoulders and joked, "As long as you're not afraid of making yourself sound old." Yang Inflammation couldn't help glaring at him. "By the way, can I use the insect enslavement bracelet now?" Yang Kai asked. "It's best if you don't." Yang Inflammation said solemnly, "The exotic insects in the insect enslavement bracelet are extremely fierce. With your current cultivation, even if you release them, you won't be able to control them and will only suffer backlash. Have you ever seen the Insect Emperor use the insect enslavement bracelet to deal with you?" Yang Kai shook his head. From the beginning to the end, he only used 10,000 poison evil insects to control his subordinates and use them to seize someone else's body. "That's right, even the Insect Emperor didn't dare use them casually, let alone you. You should wait until you reach the Origin King realm." "All right." Yang Kai nodded indifferently. In any case, he had many means to deal with his enemies now, so he didn't lack the help of the insect enslavement bracelet. Next, Yang Kai told Yang Inflammation about Serene Soul Island. Regarding Serene Soul Island, Yang Inflammation didn't deny that she had something to do with it and even told Yang Kai that Serene Soul Island was indeed sealed by her. However, Yang Inflammation didn't explain what was hidden inside. "I can only tell you that Serene Soul Island is a door. If you really want to open it, gather all the Star Emperor tokens and you'll naturally know when the time comes." After coming out from Yang Inflammation's place, Yang Kai went to Snow and Ice Peak. Snow and Ice Peak was one of the 72 auxiliary peaks of High Heaven Sect's 81 peaks. What was even rarer was that there was an ice attribute earth vein at the base of the peak, so within a few dozen kilometers of Snow and Ice Peak, the temperature was extremely low all year round. Occasionally, heavy snowflakes would fall, painting the entire mountain a silvery white color. This situation became even more obvious after Su Yang moved to Snow and Ice Peak. Since Su Yang became the peak master of Ice Snow Peak, the world energy aura of the entire Ice Snow Peak had become so rich that it was almost impossible to disperse. Cultivators with slightly lower strength couldn't even approach Ice Snow Peak, and even those with slightly higher strength had to circulate their Saint Chi to resist the cold after entering Ice Snow Peak. However, this kind of environment was extremely comfortable for Su Yang. There was no one else on Snow and Ice Peak, only a few people from Ice Sect were living and cultivating here. Besides Su Yang, there were only Qing Ya, Qian Yu, and Qian Hao. Yang Kai went straight to the southwest corner of Snow and Ice Peak. On the ground, there was a thick layer of ice that reflected light, so Yang Kai's footsteps were extremely light. In the southwest corner, under a giant tree wrapped in silver, Su Yang sat cross-legged on the 10,000-year ice jade pedestal, a pair of white Saint Chi wings spread out behind her back. The look on her pretty face was dignified and sacred, giving off an inviolable aura. Her hands were forming a strange seal while the profound frost divine sword she obtained from Iceheart Valley was suspended mid-air. As she breathed, the surrounding ice attribute aura flocked into her body, like streams flowing into the sea, while the white wings behind her flapped slightly. With Su Yang as the center, within a 1,000-meter radius, there was a strange aura that seemed capable of freezing all things in the world. Hersha had reached the grand accomplishment stage. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.